I am Claire, 31 years old, and to the outside world I am just a quiet freelance bookkeeper who drives a rusted Volvo. In reality, I am a crisis manager for Fortune 500 companies specializing in high-stakes debt restructuring and corporate takeovers. My family thinks I count pennies for a living, but I actually move millions before breakfast. After my parents passed away, my brother kicked me out of the house, leaving me homeless in the rain. At the will reading, he mocked me, saying he hoped I enjoyed life on the street because he made sure I got nothing. Then the lawyer announced there was one final section to the will. When he read out my true net worth, my brother fainted cold on the floor. Before I tell you how I destroyed them without raising my voice, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you. The rain was coming down in sheets that evening, blurring the windshield of my silver 2010 Volvo as I turned onto the driveway. It had been a long, exhausting day at the funeral home, finalizing the arrangements for my parents. I was the one who had selected the caskets. I was the one who had chosen the flowers. I was the one who had sat by their bedsides for the last 3 years of hospice care, while my brother Tyler was busy living his best life in Miami. My body ached with a fatigue that went down to my bones. All I wanted was to step into the warm hallway of the house I had grown up in, take a hot shower, and sleep for 12 hours. I pulled the car up to the garage, noting that the porch lights were blazing. That was strange. I was sure I had turned them off when I left this morning. I grabbed my bag, shielding my head with a newspaper, and ran toward the front door. My hand shook slightly as I slid the brass key into the lock. It was a motion I had performed thousands of times since I was a child. Turn right push and the heavy oak door would swing open. But this time the key stopped halfway. I frowned, wiping the rain from my eyes, and tried again. It would not turn. I jiggled it, thinking the old mechanism was just stuck due to the humidity. Nothing. It felt like the wrong key entirely. I stepped back confused and looked up at the house number. Yes, this was my home. Then I looked down. That was when I saw them. 4 large black industrial-strength trash bags were piled haphazardly on the wet concrete of the porch right next to the welcome mat. They were soaking wet, glistening under the harsh yellow porch light. A sinking feeling hit my stomach colder than the rain. I reached out and touched the plastic of the nearest bag. It felt lumpy and chaotic. Through a tear in the side, I saw the sleeve of my favorite gray cardigan, the one I wore when I worked late nights. These were not trash. These were my clothes. Before I could process what was happening, the front door swung open. Warm light spilled out, blinding me for a second. Tyler stood in the doorway. He was wearing one of Dad's vintage silk robes, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. I could smell the expensive single malt whiskey. From where I stood, a bottle Dad had been saving for a special occasion that never came. Tyler looked down at me, his face flushed, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. He did not look like a grieving son. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. "Key does not work anymore, Claire," he said, his voice slurring slightly. "I had a locksmith over about an hour after you left. Quick service. Expensive, but worth it for the peace of mind." I stared at him, rainwater dripping from my nose. "Tyler, what is going on? Why are my clothes on the porch? Open the door. I need to come inside." He took a slow sip of the whiskey, savoring it, making me wait. "You do not live here anymore, little sister. This is an asset now. My asset." Vanessa and I were talking, and we realized we cannot have you cluttering up the place. We need to stage the house for sale. You know how it is. Buyers do not want to see the sad spinster sister living in the guest room. It brings down the property value. I felt a surge of anger, but I pushed it down, locking it away in the same mental box where I kept my business negotiations. "Tyler, I have lived here for 3 years, taking care of Mom and Dad. My residency is established here. You cannot just lock me out without an eviction notice. It is illegal." Tyler laughed, a harsh barking sound that echoed in the quiet neighborhood. "Illegal. Listen to you. You sound like you think you have rights. Look, the house is sealed for asset inventory. Lawyer's orders. Or at least that is what I'm telling the neighbors. Besides, who are you going to call? A lawyer. With what money? You barely make enough to put gas in that piece of junk car of yours." He kicked the nearest trash bag with his slippered foot. It slid across the wet concrete, stopping near the edge of the stairs. "There is your stuff. Well, most of it. Vanessa kept a few things she thought might sell on Poshmark. Consider it a handling fee for us packing your bags. Now be a good girl and get off my property before I call the cops and tell them a vagrant is trespassing. I looked at him, really looked at him. This was the brother I had tutored in math, the brother I had covered for when he wrecked his car in high school. The entitlement radiated off him like heat. He genuinely believed he was the king of this castle because he was the firstborn son. He had no idea that the mortgage he thought he was inheriting had been defaulted on 5 years ago. He had no idea who actually held the deed to this house. I could have ended him right then. I could have pulled out my phone, called the sheriff, and showed them the digital deed stored on my secure cloud drive. But that would be too easy. That would be a mercy. And tonight, looking at my soaked clothes, I was fresh out of mercy. I am going. Tyler, I said, my voice steady, betraying nothing. Enjoy the whiskey. It gave Dad a terrible hangover. I was bending down to drag the heavy bags toward my car when the blinding white light of a smartphone flash hit my face. I squinted, turning toward the source. Vanessa, my sister-in-law, stepped out from behind Tyler. She was fully made up, wearing a black designer dress that I knew was a knockoff, and she was holding her latest iPhone up recording. "Hey guys," she said, pitching her voice into that fake, sympathetic tone she used for her social media followers. "I am so sorry you have to see this. It is just so heartbreaking. We are trying to mourn Mom and Dad, and Tyler's sister is just causing such a scene." She moved the camera closer to me, zooming in on my wet hair and the trash bags. I could see the live viewer count ticking up on her screen. "Look at this mess," she continued, narrating to her audience. "We tried to help her, you guys. We really did. But some people just refuse to get their lives together. She has been mooching off Tyler's parents for years, and now that they are gone, she expects us to just support her indefinitely. It is toxic, honestly. We had to set boundaries for our own mental health." I stood there holding a bag of clothes, water soaking through my shoes. Vanessa circled me like a shark, making sure to get my old Volvo in the frame. "So we are doing the hard thing," she said, sighing dramatically. "We are practicing tough love. Hopefully this will be the wake-up call Claire needs to finally get a real job and stop being a burden. Send us prayers, guys. This is so stressful for us." I watched her performance with a detachment that would have terrified her if she was smart enough to notice. She was destroying my reputation in real time, painting me as a leech to her 5,000 followers. She wanted a reaction. She wanted me to scream, to cry, to lunge at her so she could capture it and play the victim. I gave her nothing. I simply reached down to the second bag. As I lifted it, the thin plastic ripped. A heavy object slid out and clattered onto the wet pavement. It was a framed photograph. The glass cracked instantly. I froze. It was the only photo I had of me and my dad from my college graduation, the one day he had been truly proud of me before his illness took over. Tyler had thrown it in a trash bag like garbage. Vanessa gasped, panning the camera down to the broken frame. "Oh my God," she whispered loudly. "Look at that. She is breaking things now. She is so unstable." I crouched down, ignoring the camera, ignoring the rain, ignoring the rage that was starting to boil in my chest. I picked up the photo. A shard of glass sliced into my thumb, but I did not feel the pain. I carefully brushed a wet leaf off my father's smiling face. I stood up, tucking the frame under my arm. I looked directly into the lens of Vanessa's phone. I did not blink. I did not frown. I just stared until Vanessa took a nervous step back. "Make sure you save that video, Vanessa," I said softly. "You are going to want to remember this moment." She scoffed, recovering her composure. "Whatever, Claire. Just leave. You are ruining the vibe." I loaded the bags into the trunk of the Volvo. It took 3 trips. Tyler watched from the doorway, sipping his drink, looking bored. Vanessa kept filming until I slammed the trunk shut. I got into the driver's seat. The interior of the car was cold and smelled of damp upholstery. I started the engine. It sputtered once, then roared to life. I did not look back at the house. I did not look at the brother who had betrayed me, or the sister-in-law who was monetizing my humiliation. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. As I pulled away, I saw the lights of the house flicker, once the old wiring acting up in the storm. I knew exactly which circuit breaker was faulty. I knew everything about that house. They were just tourists. I drove for 20 minutes until I reached the Walmart Supercenter on the edge of town. The parking lot was vast and mostly empty, bathed in the sterile glow of floodlights. I parked in the far corner away from the store entrance, nestled between two RVs. This was a safe zone. I knew that Walmart allowed overnight parking for travelers. Tonight I was a traveler. I reclined the driver's seat as far as it would go. The rain drummed rhythmically on the metal roof, enclosing me in a small private world. I was homeless. Technically. If anyone looked in the window, they would see a woman in wet clothes surrounded by garbage bags sleeping in a 15-year-old car. They would see exactly what Tyler and Vanessa wanted them to see. A failure. A victim. I reached into the passenger seat and pulled out my laptop bag. It was a battered, nondescript messenger bag that I had bought at a thrift store. But inside was a top-of-the-line customized machine with military-grade encryption. I opened it, and the screen glowed blue in the darkness. I tethered the connection to my phone's secure hotspot. My fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing the standard interface and logging into a remote server based in Zurich. A window popped up, requesting biometric authentication. I placed my thumb, the one with the fresh cut from the picture frame, onto the scanner. A small green light blinked. Access granted. I navigated to my work email. There was a message waiting for me from a client in London, a hedge fund manager who had been trying to acquire a failing biotech firm for months. I had spent the last 2 weeks orchestrating the deal, finding the hidden leverage points in the biotech firm's debt structure. Subject: acquisition complete. Message: Claire, you are a genius. The board folded exactly when you said they would. The papers are signed. Your commission has been wired. I opened my banking portal. The interface was minimalist, just black text on a white background. I refreshed the page. The balance updated. Previous balance, $8,350,000. Incoming wire, $200,000. Current balance, $8,550,000. I stared at the number, $8.5 million. I could buy the house Tyler just kicked me out of 7 times over in cash. I could buy the real estate agency Vanessa worked for and fire her tomorrow. I could stay in the presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton tonight if I wanted to, but I did not. I closed the laptop. The screen went black, returning me to the darkness of the parking lot. I pulled my coat tighter around me. Tyler thought he had taken my home. He thought he had stripped me of my dignity. He thought power came from a house, a title, or a bottle of whiskey. He was wrong. Power is what you have when you have nothing left to lose. I reclined the seat further and watched the rain streak down the window. Let them have their victory lap. Let Vanessa post her videos. Let Tyler drink the whiskey. They were celebrating the start of their new life. They had no idea they had just started a countdown. The will reading was in 4 days. That gave me 96 hours to prepare. I closed my eyes, listening to the rain. For the first time all day, I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter who just watched the prey walk willingly into the trap. Sleep well. Tyler, I whispered to the empty car. You are going to need it. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of a shopping cart hitting the side of my car. I sat up with a start, my neck stiff from sleeping in the bucket seat. The rain had stopped, replaced by a gray, overcast sky. I rubbed my face, feeling the grit of yesterday's makeup and the exhaustion that still clung to me. I looked out the window. A teenage employee was rounding up carts, indifferent to the fact that he had just dented my door. It did not matter. The car was a prop, just like my cheap clothes. I drove to a nearby truck stop to shower. The water was lukewarm, and the soap smelled like industrial disinfectant, but it washed away the funeral and the rain. I changed into a fresh set of clothes from one of the trash bags, a pair of black slacks and a simple white blouse. I looked in the cracked mirror above the sink. I looked ordinary, boring, invisible, perfect. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram. Vanessa had tagged me in a new post. I opened it. It was a picture of her and Tyler having breakfast on the patio of my parents' house, my house. The caption read, "New beginnings in our dream home. So grateful for this legacy. #blessed, #homeowners, #morning vibes." I scrolled through the comments. So happy for you guys. You deserve it, V. What happened to the sister? Is she okay? Vanessa had replied to that one. We are praying for her. She is in a bad place, mentally refusing help. It is sad, but we have to focus on the positive. I took a screenshot. Evidence. Every lie they told was ammunition I would use later. I got back in the car and drove toward the city center. I had a meeting, but not with a client. I needed to meet with my personal attorney, Mr. Sterling. Not the family lawyer who was handling the will. He was an old man named Henderson, who Tyler thought he could push around. Mr. Sterling was different. I paid him a retainer of $5,000 a month just to keep my name out of public records. I parked 3 blocks away from his office, walking the rest of the way to ensure no one saw my car. Sterling's office was in a glass skyscraper that overlooked the harbor. The receptionist nodded when she saw me pressing a button under her desk to unlock the heavy glass doors. She did not ask who I was. She knew. Claire, Mr. Sterling said, standing up as I entered his corner office. He was a sharp man in his 50s, wearing a suit that cost more than Tyler's entire wardrobe. He gestured to the leather chair opposite him. I am sorry for your loss, and I am sorry for the report I received from the private investigator this morning. I sat down, crossing my legs. You have the report on Tyler's finances. Sterling slid a thick file across the mahogany desk. It is worse than we thought. He is not just broke, Claire. He is drowning. He owes $45,000 in credit card debt, another $20,000 in personal loans, and he has been leveraging his expected inheritance to get extensions from creditors. He is banking everything on selling the house. I opened the file. My eyes scanned the numbers. Late fees, overdraft notices, gambling debts disguised as investment losses. It was a roadmap of irresponsibility. And the house I asked. Sterling smiled, a predatory glint in his eye. That is the best part. He has no idea about the foreclosure 5 years ago. He has no idea Phoenix Holdings LLC owns the deed. He thinks the paperwork is just a formality. He is already talking to real estate agents. I have a contact who said Tyler promised to list the property by Monday. Let him, I said, closing the file. Let him list it. Let him show it. Let him believe he is a millionaire right up until the moment he signs the dotted line. Sterling leaned forward. There is one more thing. Vanessa. She has been looking into the accounts of your parents' small business. She thinks there is money there. She does not realize the business has been defunct for a decade and the accounts are empty. I laughed softly. She is going to be disappointed. Claire, Sterling said, his tone turning serious. Are you sure you want to do this at the will reading? We could settle this quietly. We could just serve them with an eviction notice and be done with it. Why the theater? I stood up, walking to the window. I looked down at the city below, the tiny cars moving like ants. I thought about the trash bags on the porch. I thought about the broken picture frame. I thought about the tough love Vanessa was bragging about to her followers. Because Mr. Sterling, I said, turning back to him, they did not just want the money. They wanted to see me fall. They wanted to step over me to feel tall. If I just evict them, they will spin it. They will play the victim. They will tell the world I used my high-priced lawyers to steal their inheritance. I need to expose them. I need them to feel the ground disappear beneath their feet in a room full of witnesses. I need them to know that they did not just lose. I need them to know they never had a chance. Sterling nodded slowly. Very well. The will reading is set for Thursday at Henderson's office. I will make sure the paperwork for Phoenix Holdings is included in the final addendum. Do you want me to be there? No, I said. If you are there, they will get suspicious. I will go alone. Just make sure Henderson has the updated file, and make sure the valuation of my net worth is certified. Consider it done. I left the office and walked back to my car. The sun was coming out, but the air was still cold. I had 3 days left. I needed to kill time. I needed to maintain the charade. I drove back to the suburbs, parking down the street from the house. I watched from a distance as a moving truck pulled up. Tyler and Vanessa were not wasting any time. They were moving new furniture in staging furniture, white sofas, abstract art, things that looked expensive but were actually cheap props. They were erasing my parents. They were erasing me. I watched as Vanessa directed the movers, pointing and shouting. She looked like she was in her element. She was the queen of the manor. My phone buzzed again. A text from Tyler. Hey, just a heads up. We are changing the locks again today. Don't try to sneak in. Your stuff is gone. I didn't reply. I just watched. A delivery guy walked up the driveway with a case of champagne. They were planning a party, a housewarming party in a house they didn't own. "Perfect," I whispered. I started the car and drove away. I spent the next 2 days working from coffee shops, sleeping in the car, and showering at truck stops. I wore the same clothes. I let my hair get a little messy. I stopped wearing makeup. I was method acting the role of the destitute sister. On the third day, the day before the will reading, Tyler called me. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message. "Claire, it's Tyler. Look, Mom and Dad had some debts. A lot of debts. I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to have the lawyer draw up a waiver. You sign your rights to the estate over to me, and I'll take on the debts. You walk away clean. No liability. It's the least I can do. Come by the house tonight to sign it. Don't make this difficult." I listened to the message twice. He was trying to trick me. He thought if I signed a waiver, I would be signing away my claim to the house, which he still thought was part of the estate. He was trying to hustle me. It was pathetic, but I decided to go. I needed to see the look in his eyes when he thought he had won. I needed to fuel the fire one last time. I drove to the house that evening. The windows were glowing warm and inviting. I could hear music. I walked up the driveway past the spot where my clothes had been dumped. I knocked on the door. Vanessa opened it. She was wearing a white apron holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres. She looked at me with disgust. "Ugh, you're here," she said. "Go around the back. We have guests. We don't want you smelling up the foyer." I didn't say a word. I walked around to the back door, the servants' entrance. The kitchen was chaotic with caterers. Tyler was there holding court with a group of people I didn't recognize, probably real estate investors he was trying to impress. He saw me and excused himself, walking over with a fake smile plastered on his face. "Glad you came," he said, keeping his voice low. He pulled a folded document out of his jacket pocket. "Here, sign this. It just says you decline any involvement in the estate's financial burdens. It protects you." I took the paper. It was poorly drafted, probably something he downloaded off the internet. It was a full release of claims. "I don't have a pen," I said, my voice quiet. He sighed, annoyed, and handed me a gold-plated pen. "Just sign it, Claire. Stop wasting my time." I looked at the paper. I looked at the pen. I looked at the kitchen that I had remodeled for Mom 2 years ago with my own money, a fact he didn't know. "I can't sign this." "Tyler," I said. His smile dropped. "What I think I'll wait for the will reading," I said, handing the paper back. "I want to hear what Dad wanted." Tyler stepped closer, his face turning ugly. "Listen to me, you ungrateful little brat. Dad wanted the strong to survive. He didn't want his legacy wasted on a failure like you. If you don't sign this, I will make sure the lawyers bury you in legal fees. I will sue you for the cost of the funeral. I will ruin you." I looked him dead in the eye. "You can try, Tyler." I turned and walked out the back door, leaving him fuming in the kitchen. As I walked to my car, I heard glass breaking inside. He had thrown something. Good. He was rattled. I got into my Volvo and drove to the parking lot for one last night. Tomorrow was the day. Tomorrow the rain would stop and the fire would begin. I set my alarm for 7 o'clock in the morning. I needed to be at the lawyer's office early. I wanted to be sitting in the chair when they walked in. I wanted to be the first thing they saw before their world ended. It had been 72 hours since I watched the rain wash over the windshield of my car in the Walmart parking lot. 72 hours of silence from the people who shared my DNA. I had spent those 3 days working from a corner booth in a 24-hour diner, sipping black coffee, and managing a hostile takeover for a pharmaceutical giant in Tokyo. My laptop screen was a window into a world where I commanded respect, where my signature moved markets, and where my silence terrified board members. But here in this town, to my family, I was just Claire, the failure, the invisible sister. My phone vibrated against the Formica table, shattering my concentration. I looked at the screen. Tyler. It was the first time he had reached out since the night he threw my clothes onto the porch. I let it ring twice before picking up, composing my voice to sound small and hesitant. "Hello, Tyler." "Claire, listen," he said, skipping the pleasantries. His voice was rushed, agitated, with a background noise of clinking glass and upbeat jazz music. "I need you to come by the house. Today. Right now, actually. The lawyer sent over some preliminary paperwork regarding the estate distribution. Just standard administrative stuff, but I need your signature to get the ball rolling so we can, move forward. I paused, calculating. It was Sunday. Law firms were closed. Lawyers did not send administrative paperwork on Sunday afternoons unless it was an emergency, and there was no emergency. He was lying. I knew he was lying, but I needed to know why. I am actually kind of busy looking for an apartment, Tyler. I lied. Can it wait until tomorrow? No, it cannot wait. He snapped his patience, instantly fraying. Look, do you want your share of the inheritance or not? I am trying to help you here. I'm trying to make sure you get a little nest egg so you do not have to live in your car. Just come over. It will take 10 minutes. Fine, I said. I will be there in 20 minutes. I hung up and closed my laptop. A nest egg. That was rich coming from a man who had overdrafted his checking account 3 times last month. I packed my bag, left a generous tip for the waitress who had kept my coffee cup full, and walked out to my Volvo. The sun was shining today, a cruel contrast to the storm in my heart. As I drove toward the neighborhood where I grew up, I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. It was not fear. It was the physical sensation of putting on armor. As I turned onto the street, I saw immediately why Tyler wanted me there. The driveway was not empty. It was packed. There were 2 Mercedes, a Lexus SUV, and a bright red BMW convertible that I recognized as belonging to the top real estate broker in the county. Cars lined the street in front of the house. This was not a document signing. This was a party. I slowed down as I approached the house, my parents' house. The lawn had been freshly mowed, likely by a service Tyler had hired on credit. There were balloons tied to the mailbox, gold and black balloons. It looked like a celebration. I pulled my rusted silver Volvo up to the curb, parking behind the shiny Lexus. It looked like a blemish on a perfect picture. My phone buzzed again. A text from Vanessa. Park down the street. We have potential buyers here. Do not block the view. I stared at the message. They were already selling it. The body was barely cold, the will had not even been read, and they were already counting the money. I put the car in reverse and parked 2 blocks away, hidden behind a large oak tree. I walked back to the house, my heels clicking on the pavement. I was wearing the same black slacks and white blouse I had worn for days, but I had pressed them in the diner bathroom. I looked presentable, but clearly not wealthy. I walked up the front path, reaching for the door handle. It was locked. I rang the doorbell. I could hear laughter inside, the murmur of a crowd. The door opened, but it wasn't Tyler. It was Vanessa. She was wearing a tight white cocktail dress that looked like it belonged in a nightclub, not a Sunday brunch. Her face was plastered with makeup, and she held a glass of champagne. Her smile dropped the moment she saw me. "You are late," she hissed, stepping out onto the porch and pulling the door half shut behind her so the guests would not see me. "Tyler said I needed to sign papers," I said, keeping my voice flat. "Yeah, well, plans changed," she said, looking me up and down with open disdain. "Look, we have the top movers and shakers of the real estate world inside. This is a networking opportunity for Tyler. We are launching the sale of the property. We need everything to be perfect." "So why am I here?" I asked. Vanessa rolled her eyes. "The catering service messed up. They sent the food but forgot the server for the grill station. Tyler is busy entertaining, and I obviously cannot stand over hot coals in this dress." She reached behind a potted plant and pulled out a crumpled black apron. She tossed it at me. It hit my chest and slid down to my hands. "Put this on," she ordered. "You know how to work the grill. Dad taught you right. Just keep the burgers and the steaks coming. And try to be invisible. Do not talk to the guests unless they ask for something." I looked at the apron in my hands. It was stained with grease from some previous use. "You want me to work as your maid at my parents' house?" Vanessa laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Do not be dramatic, Claire. It is a gig. I will pay you. $50 an hour. That is what more than you make in a week doing your little bookkeeping for Mom and Dad's friends. Take the money. You look like you need it." I looked past her through the sliver of the open door. I saw Tyler inside laughing, clapping a man on the back. He looked like he owned the world. If I walked away now, I would save my dignity, but I would lose the intelligence. I needed to hear what they were saying. I needed to know their plans so I could destroy them thoroughly. "Fine," I said, tying the apron around my waist. $50 an hour? Cash. Good girl, Vanessa said, smirking. Go around the side gate to the backyard. Do not come through the house. I walked through the wet grass around the side of the house. The backyard had been transformed. They had rented high-top tables with white linens. There was a bar set up near the pool. About 30 people were mingling, holding drinks, eating shrimp cocktails. They were all real estate agents, developers, and local investors. I recognized a few of them. Vultures. They smelled blood in the water. I walked to the large stainless steel grill built into the outdoor kitchen, my father's pride and joy. He had saved for 2 years to install this patio. Now strangers were ashing their cigars on his stonework. I lit the grill, the gas hissing as the flames caught. The heat hit my face, flushing my skin. I found the trays of raw meat Vanessa had left out. Expensive cuts, Wagyu beef sliders, filet mignon steaks, ribeyes. I did a quick mental calculation. There was at least $2,000 worth of meat here. Added to the liquor, the rentals, and the decorations, this party was costing them $5,000 minimum. Tyler didn't have $5,000. He was putting this on a credit card that was likely maxed out, betting everything on the sale of the house to pay it off. I started grilling. The smell of searing meat filled the air. I kept my head down, flipping burgers, turning steaks, arranging them on platters. I was invisible. To these people, I was just the help. No one looked at my face. They just looked at the tray in my hands. "Excuse me, sweetie," a man in a loud checkered suit said, snapping his fingers at me. "My steak is a little underdone. Throw it back on for a minute, will ya?" I took the plate without a word. It was medium rare, perfectly cooked, but I put it back on the grill until it was gray and tough. I handed it back. "Perfect." "Thanks, hon," he said, turning his back on me immediately to resume his conversation. I moved closer to the group, standing near the grill. Tyler was in the center of them, holding a glass of scotch, gesturing wildly. "So here is the play," Tyler was saying, his voice loud and confident. "We are looking for a quick close. All cash offers preferred. I want this liquidity fast. The market is peaking and I am not going to leave money on the table." "What is the rush, Tyler?" One of the agents asked a woman with blonde hair and sharp eyes. "This is a prime location. If you stage it right and wait for the spring season, you could get 10% more." Tyler shook his head, looking like a sage dispensing wisdom. No, you are thinking old school. Real estate is dead money. It is too slow. I need this capital out now because I have an opportunity that cannot wait." "Oh," the woman asked, raising an eyebrow. "Another property?" Tyler laughed, shaking his head. "Crypto, baby. And NFTs. I have a buddy in Miami who is launching a new series of digital assets next week. It is going to moon. I'm talking 10 times returns in a month. I take the $1 million from this house, dump it into the coin, and by Christmas I'm looking at 10 million. That is how the big dogs play. I almost dropped the tongs. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing out loud. He was selling the only tangible asset he thought he had, a house that provided shelter and stability, to gamble on a speculative digital coin that I happened to know was already crashing. I read the financial reports every morning. The specific market he was talking about was a bubble that had already burst. He just had not read the news yet. He was selling a life raft to buy a ticket on the Titanic. "That sounds risky," the woman said, skepticism coloring her tone. "Scared money do not make money," Vanessa chimed in, walking up and linking her arm through Tyler's. "We are visionaries. We are going to build an empire, and it starts with getting this old place off our hands. It is just so outdated. You know, the kitchen needs gutting. The floors are old-fashioned. We just want to be done with it." I looked down at the granite countertop of the outdoor kitchen. Outdated. My mother had chosen this granite herself. She had loved this kitchen. A younger man in a blue suit leaned in. "So what is the asking price?" Tyler grinned. "We are listing at 1.2 million, but for a quick cash deal, I might take 1.1. I flipped a burger, the grease popping and sizzling. $1.1 million. He was selling a house he did not own for money he would never see. "Hey, you!" Vanessa's voice cut through my thoughts. I looked up. She was glaring at me from across the patio. "The sliders are running low. Stop daydreaming and get more food out. These people are hungry." I nodded, grabbing a fresh tray. I walked through the crowd, offering food. I was close enough to touch them, close enough to hear their secrets. I do not know, one agent whispered to another as I passed. The title search might be tricky. I heard the old man had some tax liens. Tyler says it is clean, the other replied. He says he is the sole executor. I walked back to the grill, my heart pounding with a cold, hard rhythm. They had no idea. They were discussing the sale of a property that belonged to Phoenix Holdings, LLC. They were discussing a transaction that was legally impossible. Tyler walked over to the grill to grab a skewer. He looked at me, his eyes glassy with alcohol. "You are doing a good job, Claire," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "See, you are useful when you want to be. Maybe when we sell the place, I will give you a little bonus, a couple $100. You could buy some new clothes. Those pants are depressing." He bit into the skewer sauce dripping onto his chin. "Thank you, Tyler," I said softly. He leaned in closer, smelling of scotch and arrogance. "Just remember who looks out for you. I could have hired a real catering company, but I gave the job to family. That is charity." He turned and walked back to his admirers. I watched him go. I watched him laugh. I watched him high-five a man who was probably going to try to lowball him on the offer. I looked at the fire in the grill. I watched the flames lick the metal grates. I had everything I needed. I knew his motivation, greed. I knew his timeline, immediate. I knew his weakness, arrogance. And I knew his plan, financial suicide. I worked for another 2 hours. I served them. I cleaned up their napkins. I scraped the plates. When the last guest had left, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. Vanessa walked over to me, opening her clutch purse. She pulled out a wad of cash and counted out 3 $100 bills. "Here," she said, thrusting the money at me. 300. "I am being generous. You were okay. A little slow on the refills, but whatever." I took the money. It felt dirty in my hand. "When do I sign the papers?" I asked. Tyler walked out, loosening his tie. "Oh, the lawyer said we can just do it at the reading on Thursday. Save the notary fee. Just make sure you are there. And try to dress better than this. I do not want you embarrassing us in front of Mr. Henderson." I folded the bills and put them in my pocket. "I will be there, Tyler. Do not worry." I walked around the side of the house back to my car. My feet ached. My clothes smelled like smoke and grease. I felt degraded, used, and small. But as I sat in the driver's seat of the Volvo, I did not cry. I took the $300 Vanessa had given me and put it in the glove compartment. I would keep this money. I would frame it. It was the last money they would ever have. I started the engine and drove away into the twilight. They had their party. They had their applause. They thought they were kings and queens of the real estate world. They didn't know that the servant who cooked their food was the one holding the eviction notice. Thursday. Thursday was coming, and I would bring the fire with me. The smoke from the grill had seeped into every pore of my skin, forming a greasy, invisible film that made me feel heavy and suffocated. My hands were sticky with marinade, and my feet throbbed in my sensible flat shoes. I had been standing for 3 hours straight, serving sliders and chicken skewers to a crowd of people who looked through me as if I were made of glass. To them, I was just a mechanism of service, a pair of floating hands that delivered food and took away dirty napkins. I kept my head down, my eyes fixed on the tray in my hands, navigating the crowded patio with the practiced invisibility of someone who had spent a lifetime observing from the sidelines. The sun was beginning to dip lower, casting long golden shadows across the pool deck. The alcohol was flowing freely now. The polite murmurs of the early afternoon had evolved into raucous laughter and boastful shouting. I could hear Tyler holding court near the deep end of the pool, his voice carrying over the music. He was telling a story about a yacht trip in the Mediterranean, a trip I knew for a fact he had never taken. He was piecing together fragments of our father's stories and claiming them as his own, wearing our father's life like a costume that was 2 sizes too big for him. I adjusted the heavy tray of BBQ ribs on my shoulder, preparing for another round. I needed to circulate near the back door, where a group of older gentlemen had gathered. These were the serious investors, the ones who were not swayed by Tyler's flashy talk about crypto and NFTs. They were looking at the foundation of the house, discussing the roof line, pointing at the retaining wall. They were the real danger to Tyler's plan, and I wanted to hear what they were saying. As I approached them, a man turned around. He was holding a glass of iced tea, looking out of place amidst the champagne drinkers. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, with a shock of white hair and kind, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looked at me, his gaze drifting over the stained apron and the tray of ribs. Then he stopped. He squinted, leaning in slightly, his expression shifting from indifference to sudden recognition. "Claire," he asked, his voice low and raspy. "Is that you?" I froze. I knew that voice. It was Mr. Abernathy. He had been my father's business partner in the hardware supply chain back in the 90s, before Dad sold his share. Mr. Abernathy had been a fixture in our house when I was a child. He was the one who had given me my first calculator when I was 6 years old, because he saw how I organized my Halloween candy by net weight. He knew me. He knew I had graduated summa cum laude. He knew I had started my own consulting firm. He was the only person at this party who knew the truth. "Hello, Mr. Abernathy," I said softly, gripping the tray tighter. "My God, look at you," he said, a frown creasing his forehead. He gestured to the apron, to the grease stain on my blouse. "What on earth are you doing? I thought you were in London. Your father told me you were consulting for that banking conglomerate. Why are you serving food?" Panic spiked in my chest, not for myself, but for the precarious house of cards Tyler had built. If Mr. Abernathy started asking questions, if he started telling people that the maid was actually a financial prodigy, Tyler's narrative would crumble. And I needed that narrative to hold for 4 more days. I needed Tyler to feel safe until the trap snapped shut. "I'm just helping out," I said quickly, forcing a tight smile. "It has been a hard time. Since Mom and Dad passed, things have been complicated." "Complicated?" Mr. Abernathy echoed, his tone sharpening. "This is not complicated, Claire. This is insulting. Tyler is over there acting like he is the King of England and you are working the grill. Does he even know about the merger you handled last year? I read about it in the journal. That was brilliant work." He was raising his voice. People were starting to turn their heads. A woman in a floral dress looked over, whispering to her husband. The bubble of anonymity I had carefully maintained was about to burst. "Please, Mr. Abernathy," I whispered. "Not here." Suddenly a hand clamped down on my shoulder. It was heavy and hot. I smelled the overpowering scent of expensive cologne mixed with stale scotch. Tyler. He had crossed the patio in seconds, his radar for trouble, alerting him the moment he saw me talking to someone important. Mr. Abernathy Tyler boomed, his voice jovial, but his grip on my shoulder painfully tight. "It has been too long, sir. I see you have found our helper." "Helper?" Mr. Abernathy asked, looking from Tyler to me with confusion. "Tyler, this is your sister. She is not a helper." Tyler let out a sad, patronizing sigh. He shook his head, looking at Mr. Abernathy with a practiced expression of tragic burden. "Ah, yes. Well, you know how it is. Since the accident a few years back, Claire has not really been herself." I stiffened. There had never been an accident. He was improvising, creating a lie on the spot to explain my station in life. "Accident?" Mr. Abernathy asked. "Yes." Tyler continued, lowering his voice to a stage whisper that was meant to be overheard by everyone nearby. "A head injury. Very tragic. She gets confused, you know. She cannot handle complex tasks anymore. The stress of the corporate world. It broke her. We let her help out around the house to make her feel useful. It gives her a sense of purpose. Otherwise, she just sits in her room and stares at the wall. We are just doing our best to take care of her." My heart hammered against my ribs. I stood there paralyzed by the sheer audacity of the lie. He was painting me as mentally disabled as a charity case to cover up his own greed. He was erasing my intellect, my achievements, my entire identity, just to explain why I was wearing an apron. It was a violation deeper than the theft of the house. Mr. Abernathy looked at me, searching my eyes for the truth. "Claire, is this true?" I looked at Tyler. His eyes were hard, daring me to speak. If I corrected him now, I would cause a scene. I would look defensive. And more importantly, I would reveal my hand too early. If they knew I was competent, they might suspect I had legal maneuverings in place. They might check the deed. They might find Phoenix Holdings. I had to swallow the bile rising in my throat. I had to play the part. I looked down at my shoes, letting my shoulders slump. I like grilling Mr. Abernathy. Tyler lets me hold the spatula. The light in Mr. Abernathy's eyes died a little. He looked heartbroken. Oh, I see. I am so sorry, my dear. I did not know. That is all right, Tyler said, patting my shoulder with excessive force. Why do not you go take those ribs to the other side of the party? Claire, Mr. Abernathy, and I have grown-up business to discuss. I turned away, my face burning. I felt the eyes of the guests on me. They were not looking at me with disdain anymore. They were looking at me with pity. Poor thing. Not all there. How nice of her brother to keep her around. It was suffocating. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull out my phone and show them my bank balance. I wanted to recite the tax code from memory. But I kept walking. I walked toward the far end of the patio, my vision blurring slightly with rage. I was moving blindly, just trying to get away from the sound of Tyler's voice, when I saw a flash of white in my peripheral vision. It was Vanessa. She had been watching the whole interaction. She had seen Mr. Abernathy recognize me. She had seen the threat I posed. And unlike Tyler, who was content to merely dismiss me, Vanessa needed to destroy me. She needed to assert her dominance physically. She was walking toward me on a collision course. She was holding an empty wine glass in one hand and her phone in the other. She was not looking at where she was going. She was looking directly at me, a small, cruel smile playing on her lips. I tried to step to the left to yield the path to her. She stepped to the left. I tried to correct to the right. She mirrored me. It happened in slow motion. I saw her shoulder dip. I saw her brace herself. She lunged forward just a fraction of an inch, checking me with her hip like a hockey player. "Oops," she shrieked. The impact was harder than I expected. I stumbled. The heavy tray of BBQ ribs tipped. I tried to correct it to catch it, but gravity won. The tray flipped. A cascade of sticky, dark red BBQ sauce grease and meat rained down. Most of it hit the front of my apron and my blouse, soaking through to my skin with scalding heat. But a significant amount splattered onto the patio stones and onto Vanessa's feet. The crowd went silent. The music seemed to stop. Vanessa jumped back, letting out a scream that could have shattered glass. My shoes. "You idiot! Look what you did!" I stood there, sauce dripping from my chin, clutching the empty metal tray. I was in shock. The sauce was hot, burning my chest, but I barely felt it. All I could hear was Vanessa's screeching. She pointed a manicured finger at her feet. She was wearing a pair of towering stilettos with the signature red soles. Christian Louboutins. Or at least that is what she wanted everyone to believe. A dark smear of BBQ sauce was sliding down the side of the left shoe, staining the beige patent leather. "You clumsy freak," Vanessa yelled, playing to the audience. She grabbed Tyler's arm as he rushed over. Look what your sister did. These are brand new. They cost $1,200. She ruined them." Tyler looked at the mess. He looked at me, his face twisting into a mask of anger. He didn't care about the shoes. He cared that I was ruining the aesthetic of his perfect party. "Claire, seriously," he hissed. "Can you not do one simple thing without screwing it up?" "I did not mean to," I stammered, playing my role. "You bumped into me. Do not you dare blame me." Vanessa interrupted, her voice shrill. "I was standing right here. You walked right into me with that filthy tray. You are just jealous. You did it on purpose because you are jealous that I am the lady of the house and you are just the help." She looked around at the guests, seeking validation. "Is not that right? She has been glaring at me all day." The guests shuffled uncomfortably. No one spoke up for me, not even Mr. Abernathy, who was too far away to see what had really happened. Vanessa looked down at her shoes again. She made a show of gasping, of being on the verge of tears. "I cannot believe this. These are ruined. You have to pay for them, Claire. I do not have $1,200, I whispered, staring at the ground. "I know you do not," Vanessa snapped. "You do not have anything, but you are going to fix this, right now." She took a step back and pointed at the ground. "Clean it up." I looked at her. What clean? My shoes. She enunciated every word, her voice dripping with venom. Get down there and wipe them off before the sauce sets and stains the leather permanently. Do it. Now. The silence on the patio was deafening. This was it. This was the bottom. She wasn't just asking me to clean a spill. She was asking me to kneel. She was asking me to bow before her in front of the people she wanted to impress. She was demanding total submission. Tyler stood next to her, crossing his arms. You heard her, Claire. It is the least you can do after ruining her property. Be a good girl and clean up your mess. I felt a trembling in my hands. My instinct was to throw the metal tray at them. My instinct was to stand tall, wipe the sauce from my face, and tell them exactly who owned the ground they were standing on. But I looked at the faces in the crowd. They were watching, waiting. If I fought back now, I was the crazy sister. If I submitted, I was the victim. And more importantly, if I submitted, Tyler and Vanessa would feel invincible. They would feel like they had won. And when people feel like they have won, they get careless. I took a breath. I slowly lowered myself to my knees. The patio stones were hard and cold against my legs. I reached into my apron pocket and pulled out a rag I had been using to clean the grill. No, not that filthy rag, Vanessa snapped. Use your sleeve. Your blouse is already ruined anyway. I paused. This was pure cruelty. But I nodded. I extended my arm. I leaned forward, bringing my face inches away from her feet. The smell of cheap leather and adhesive filled my nose. I began to wipe the sauce from the side of her shoe with the cuff of my white blouse. The motion was slow, methodical. I could hear Vanessa let out a sigh of satisfaction above me. See? She is learning, Vanessa said to the crowd, her voice lighter, conversational again. You just have to be firm with her. I kept wiping. As the sauce cleared away, I got a good look at the shoe. My face was only 6 inches away from the material. I had an eye for detail. It was what made me millions in forensic accounting. I knew quality, I knew luxury, and I knew exactly what a real Christian Louboutin looked like. I looked at the heel. The stitching was uneven. On a real pair, the stitching is invisible, buried within the leather. Here it was jagged, a slightly different shade of beige than the rest of the shoe. I looked at the curve of the sole. It was too steep, lacking the graceful arch of the authentic design. But the smoking gun was the red sole itself. As my sleeve rubbed against the bottom edge where the sauce had dripped, a tiny flake of red paint chipped off. Underneath the red was a dull black plastic. Real Louboutins are not painted. The sole is made of red leather and lacquer that runs all the way through. These were painted. Spray painted. I shifted my angle slightly. There on the inner arch, barely visible, unless you were kneeling on the ground like a servant, was a tiny clear sticker. It was peeling at the corner. I squinted. Made in China. Synthetic materials. I froze. These were not $1,200 shoes. These were $50 knockoffs from a website that sold counterfeits. She was screaming about property damage for a pair of shoes that cost less than the tray of meat I had just dropped. A bubble of laughter rose in my throat. I choked it down, turning it into a cough. I looked up just for a second, past the hem of her white dress, past the fake diamond bracelet on her wrist, up to her face. She was looking at her friends, beaming, basking in her power. She thought she was a queen, forcing a peasant to kiss her ring. She didn't know the peasant knew her crown was made of tinfoil. I looked back down at the shoe. The fake Class 1 replica. It was the perfect metaphor for Vanessa. Shiny on the outside, cheap plastic on the inside, and crumbling the moment you applied a little pressure. I finished wiping the sauce. The shoe was clean, save for the chip in the paint that I had discovered. Is that better? I asked, my voice low, submissive. Vanessa wiggled her foot, inspecting it. I guess. Although you probably scratched it with your rough shirt. Whatever. Just get out of my sight. You smell like a smokehouse. I stood up. My knees cracked. My blouse was ruined, stained brown and red. My hair was sticking to my forehead. I looked like a wreck. But as I turned to walk away, I wasn't crying. I walked past Tyler, who wouldn't meet my eyes. I walked past Mr. Abernathy, who looked like he wanted to intervene but didn't know how. I walked through the crowd of silent guests. As I reached the side gate, I allowed myself a small, imperceptible smile. Nice shoes, Vanessa, I whispered to myself. I walked to my car, the smile growing. They were frauds. Every single thing about them was a lie. The house was not theirs. The money was not theirs. The shoes were not theirs. Even their cruelty was borrowed, a cheap imitation of power. I sat in the driver's seat of the Volvo, peeling the sticky blouse away from my skin. I checked my phone. I had an email from my private investigator. Subject: Tyler's crypto portfolio. Message: it is confirmed. He put the deposit for the movers and the catering on a high-interest payday loan. He is completely tapped out. I looked at the house one last time. The party was starting up again. The music was getting louder. They were celebrating their victory over the slow sister. Let them dance, I thought. Let them dance in their fake shoes on the ground they didn't own. The music was about to stop, and when it did, I would be the only one left standing. I started the car and drove away. I had 4 days to scrub the BBQ sauce off my skin, put on my power suit, and prepare for the final act. The maid was gone. The CEO was coming back, and she was going to bring the receipt for everything. I slipped into the guest bathroom and locked the door behind me. The heavy click of the latch was the most satisfying sound I had heard all day. For a moment, the noise of the party, the clinking glasses, the fake laughter, the thumping bass of the music was muffled, replaced by the hum of the ventilation fan. I leaned back against the solid oak door and exhaled a long, shaky breath that I had been holding since Vanessa's shoe touched the patio stones. My hands were trembling not from fear, but from the adrenaline of suppressed rage. I looked down at my blouse. It was a disaster. The BBQ sauce had soaked through the cheap fabric, leaving a dark, greasy stain across my chest and stomach. It smelled of vinegar and smoke, a scent that now made my stomach turn. I walked over to the sink. My mother had chosen this vanity. It was Italian marble, cool and smooth to the touch. She had loved this room. She used to fill it with fresh lavender soaps and plush towels. Now the counter was cluttered with Vanessa's things. A half-used bottle of cheap perfume, a makeup bag spilling open with cracked compacts, and a hair straightener that had been left plugged in, scorching a small brown mark onto the pristine stone. Even in here, in this private sanctuary, they were leaving their mark of destruction. They were consuming my parents' legacy, like termites eating away at the foundation, until nothing but dust remained. I turned on the faucet. The water came out cold and clear. I splashed it onto my face, scrubbing at my skin as if I could wash away the feeling of Vanessa's gaze. I grabbed a hand towel, one of the few remaining monogrammed ones my mother had stitched, and wetted the corner. I began to dab at the stain on my blouse. It was futile. The grease had set. I was branded. To anyone who saw me, I was exactly what Tyler had said I was. The clumsy, slow-witted sister, the help, the failure. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked tired. Her hair was frizzy from the humidity of the grill. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She looked defeated. But then I looked closer. Behind the exhaustion deep in the pupils, there was something else. A sharpness, a calculation. The eyes in the mirror were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of a predator, camouflaged in the grass, waiting for the gazelle to graze just a little bit closer. My phone vibrated in my pocket, startling me. I froze. Who would be calling me now? Tyler was outside. Vanessa was outside. They were the only ones who called this number, usually to demand something. I pulled the phone out. The screen was cracked, another prop for my character, but the caller ID was clear. Sterling. My breath caught in my throat. Mr. Sterling never called on a Sunday, unless the world was ending, or unless he had won. I swiped the screen and held the phone to my ear, my hand leaving a smear of grease on the glass. "This is Claire," I said, my voice dropping an octave, shedding the submissive tremble I used with my family. "Claire." Mr. Sterling's voice came through the line, crisp, clear, and utterly devoid of emotion. It sounded like the interior of a Rolls-Royce. "I apologize for interrupting your family time, but the transaction has cleared. We received the confirmation from the Cayman Islands holding entity 3 minutes ago." I gripped the edge of the marble sink. The water was still running a gentle stream, masking my voice from anyone who might be listening outside the door. "Tell me," I whispered. "It is done," Sterling said. "We have successfully acquired the secondary mortgage notes on the property at 42 Oak Street. We also purchased the personal debt portfolio of Mr. Tyler Vance from the 3 major credit agencies. The collection agencies were more than happy to sell the debt for pennies on the dollar, considering they had marked him as a high-risk default. I closed my eyes, letting the words wash over me like a benediction. Buying debt was a complex, dirty business, but Sterling made it sound like art. "Give me the numbers, Sterling," I said. "I need to know exactly what I own." "You own everything," he replied. "The second mortgage is valued at $450,000. Tyler has not made a payment in 6 months. The acceleration clause has been triggered. That means you have the right to demand the full amount immediately." "And his personal debt?" I asked. Sterling chuckled, a dry, rare sound. "It is impressive in a catastrophic sort of way. $80,000 in credit card debt distributed across 7 cards. A personal loan for a failed drop-shipping business he started 2 years ago, $20,000. And interestingly, a gambling debt he owes to a private lender in Las Vegas. We bought that note too. It was expensive, but I thought you would appreciate the leverage." I smiled at my reflection. The woman in the mirror smiled back, and it was terrifying. Sterling had bought Tyler's life. Every mistake he had made, every dollar he had squandered, every reckless bet he had placed, it all belonged to me now. I was not just his sister anymore. I was his creditor. I was the bank, and the bank always wins. "What about Vanessa?" I asked. "Does she have any exposure?" "We are still finalizing the audit on her," Sterling said. "But preliminary searches show she is listed as a guarantor on 2 of Tyler's cards. And that real estate license of hers. It is currently under review by the state board. Apparently there have been complaints about unethical practices. We did not even have to instigate that. She did it to herself. But now that we hold the debt she guaranteed, we can freeze her assets too." I looked at the hair straightener burning the counter. I reached out and unplugged it. So I said, watching the little red light on the device fade to black, "If I wanted to, I could bankrupt them today." "Technically, yes," Sterling said. "But I would advise waiting for the will reading. The psychological impact will be greater if you present the foreclosure notice and the debt demand simultaneously. It traps them. If they try to fight the will, you hit them with the debt. If they try to fight the debt, you evict them from the house. They have nowhere to move. It is a checkmate, Claire." I leaned in close to the mirror, whispering to the reflection. "It is not just checkmate, Sterling. It is a massacre." "There is one more thing," Sterling added, his voice turning hesitant for the first time. "The total cost of acquisition was slightly higher than we projected. Tyler's debts were extensive. We had to dip into the reserve fund from the Tokyo merger. I don't care about the cost," I said, cutting him off. "It could cost every penny I have, and it would still be a bargain." "I am not buying debt, Sterling. I am buying justice. I am buying the look on his face when he realizes the sister he mocked is the one holding the leash." "Understood," Sterling said. "The paperwork is being couriered to my office as we speak. I will have the full dossier ready for you on Thursday. Do you want me to include the eviction notice in the packet?" "Yes," I said. "And make it immediate. 24 hours notice. I want them out before the weekend." "Very well. Is there anything else?" "Yes," I said, looking at the cheap bottle of perfume on the counter. "Find out who manufactures those fake Louboutins Vanessa wears. I want to buy the company and shut it down." Sterling paused. Silence stretched on the line for 3 seconds. Then he replied, his voice perfectly professional. "I will look into it. Have a pleasant evening, Claire." The line went dead. I lowered the phone. The silence in the bathroom felt different now. It was not a refuge anymore. It was a command center. I looked at the stain on my blouse one last time. It didn't matter. Let them see the stain. Let them see the mess. It was just camouflage. Underneath this dirty, cheap fabric was a woman who had just spent $500,000 to buy her brother's destruction. I turned off the faucet. I dried my hands on the monogrammed towel, folding it neatly and placing it back on the rack covering the burn mark on the counter. I unlocked the door. The noise of the party assaulted me instantly. The laughter was louder now, more drunken. I stepped out into the hallway. Through the window, I could see Tyler standing by the pool, raising a glass of champagne, toasting to his future. I walked toward the back door, my spine straight, my head high. I was going back out there. I was going to serve them more sliders. I was going to clean up their trash. I was going to let them insult me, because every insult was just interest accruing on a debt that was about to come due. I walked past the kitchen, grabbing a fresh tray of food. I caught my reflection in the patio glass door before I pushed it open. I didn't look like a victim anymore. I looked like the CEO of Phoenix Holdings, LLC. I pushed the door open and stepped into the sunlight. "Who needs a refill?" I called out, my voice cheerful, helpful, and completely hollow. Tyler turned and smirked at me. "About time," he yelled. "Bring some more ice over here, and try not to drop it this time." I walked toward him, the ice bucket heavy in my hand. "I am coming, Tyler," I thought. "I am coming, and I am bringing hell with me." The Tuesday evening air was heavy and humid as I drove back to the house on Oak Street. My phone sat on the passenger seat, silent now, but the recording app was already open and running. I had learned a long time ago that in business and in war, if it is not recorded, it never happened. Tyler had summoned me for what he called a family strategy session. His text message had been brief and commanding. "Come over at 7. We need to settle the estate issues before the lawyers get involved." It was a transparent attempt to bypass the legal process, a move so amateur that I would have laughed if the stakes were not so personal. I pulled into the driveway, noting that the "for sale" sign was already hammered into the front lawn. It leaned slightly to the left, hasty and crooked, just like everything else my brother did. I walked up the porch steps, avoiding the spot where he had thrown my clothes days earlier. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside. The house smelled different. It used to smell of my mother's lemon polish and my father's old books. Now it smelled of stale pizza boxes and air freshener trying to cover up the scent of cigarettes. Tyler and Vanessa were sitting at the dining room table. The table was covered in papers, not organized files, but a chaotic spread of bills, brochures for luxury cars, and a single crisp document sitting right in front of Tyler. "Sit down," Claire Tyler said, not looking up from his phone. I sat in the chair that used to be my father's. It felt wrong. It felt like a violation. Vanessa was scrolling through her iPad, her fake nails clicking rhythmically against the glass. She did not acknowledge me. To her, I was just a fly buzzing around a room she already owned. Tyler finally put his phone down. He clasped his hands together and leaned forward, adopting a facial expression that I think he believed looked benevolent. It just looked predatory. "Look, Claire," he started, his voice dripping with fake concern. "We need to talk about reality. Mom and Dad are gone, and they left behind a mess, a big mess." I kept my hands folded in my lap, making myself look small. "A mess?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "Huge," Tyler said, widening his eyes for emphasis. "You have no idea. The debts they racked up in those final years. It is astronomical. Medical bills, second mortgages, unpaid taxes. If we let this go to probate, the creditors are going to come after everything. And they are not just going to come after the estate. They are going to come after us. After you." He paused, letting the fear hang in the air. He was trying to scare me. He thought I was financially illiterate. He thought I was the kind of person who threw unopened bank statements in a drawer because the numbers made me anxious. He had no idea that I read balance sheets for fun. I do not understand," I stammered. "I thought the house was paid off." Tyler sighed, a long, dramatic exhalation of patience he did not possess. "That is what they wanted you to think, Claire. They wanted to protect you. But the truth is, this house is underwater. It is a liability, a financial black hole. Now I have been talking to some people, some experts, and there is a way to save you from this." He slid the single crisp document across the table toward me. It was printed on thick, expensive paper. "What is this?" I asked, looking at it without touching it. "It is a waiver of interest," Tyler said, tapping the paper with his index finger. "Basically, it says that you are voluntarily stepping aside. You are assigning your rights to the estate over to me." I looked up at him, feigning confusion. "Why would I do that?" "Because, Claire, if you remain a beneficiary, you also remain liable for the debt." He lied. It was a bold, bald-faced lie. That is not how inheritance law works in this state or in this country. You cannot inherit debt unless you co-signed for it. But Tyler was banking on my ignorance. He continued, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "I am trying to take a bullet for you here, sis. I am willing to take on the full burden of the estate. I will deal with the creditors. I will deal with the bank. I will deal with the foreclosure notices. I will absorb all the risk. You get to walk away clean. No debt collectors calling you at work. No lawsuits. You get a fresh start." I looked at Vanessa. She was watching me now, her eyes narrowing. She knew this was a hustle. She just wanted the money. "But if I sign this," I whispered, staring at the paper, "does that mean I get nothing?" Tyler leaned back, spreading his hands. "You get freedom, Claire. Isn't that what you want? Look, be realistic. You can't afford to maintain this house. You can't afford the property taxes. You can't even afford to fix the roof. If you keep your name on the title, you will be bankrupt in 6 months. Dad told me this, you know." I froze. He was bringing Dad into it. What did Dad say? I asked, my voice barely audible. Tyler's face softened into a mask of pity. It was the most offensive thing I had ever seen. "He told me right before the end that he was worried about you," Tyler said. "He said, 'Tyler, promise me you will look after Claire. She is not like you. She does not have the head for business. She is fragile. Please make sure she does not drown in responsibilities she cannot handle.'" I felt a cold rage crystallize in my stomach. My father had never said that. My father knew exactly who I was. In the last months of his life, when the morphine allowed him moments of clarity, we had discussed market trends. We had discussed the bond yield curve. He had squeezed my hand and told me he was sorry he had not supported my career sooner. Tyler was desecrating his memory to steal a few $100,000. I looked down at the document. The text was standard boilerplate legal jargon, probably downloaded from a free legal forms website. "I, Claire Vance, hereby waive all current and future claims to the estate." "So," I said slowly, tracing the edge of the paper, "if I sign this, you take the house." Tyler shrugged, trying to look casual. "I take the house and the mountain of debt that comes with it. I will probably have to sell it just to break even. I might even lose money on the deal. But I am willing to do that for family. And if there is any money left over," I asked. After the debts are paid, Tyler laughed a short, sharp bark. "Money left over. Claire, you are living in a fantasy land. There is no pot of gold. We are talking about damage control. But hey, if by some miracle I manage to squeeze a few grand out of this rock, I will cut you a check. I promise." "You promise," I repeated. "Hand on heart," Tyler said, placing his hand over the breast pocket of his designer shirt. I looked at Vanessa. "Does this sound right to you, Vanessa?" She scoffed, flipping her hair. "Honestly, Claire, you should be thanking him. Most brothers would let you sink. He is giving you a lifeboat. Just sign the damn paper so we can go to dinner." I picked up the pen Tyler had placed next to the document. It was a heavy black Mont Blanc. Fake, of course. I could tell by the weight distribution. I held it over the signature line. Tyler leaned in, his eyes hungry. He was practically salivating. He thought he had me. He thought the mouse was about to snap its neck in the trap. I hesitated. I let the pen hover just millimeters above the paper. I can't," I said, dropping the pen. The sound of the pen hitting the table was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Tyler's face went red instantly. "What do you mean you can't?" "I need to think about it," I said, pushing my chair back. "It is a big decision. I should probably have a lawyer look at it." Tyler slammed his hand down on the table. The papers jumped. "A lawyer," he shouted. "Are you insane? A lawyer will charge you $300 an hour just to tell you the same thing I am telling you. We don't have time for lawyers. The bank is coming on Monday. We need to file this tomorrow." I stood up, clutching my purse. "I am sorry, Tyler. I need to sleep on it. I will see you at the reading on Thursday." Tyler stood up too, towering over me. He walked around the table, invading my personal space. He used his height to intimidate, a tactic he had used since we were teenagers. "You are making a mistake, Claire," he hissed, his spit landing near my cheek. "A big, expensive mistake. If you walk out that door without signing, the deal is off. No protection, no help. When the creditors come for you, and they will come, do not come crying to me. You will be on the street. You hear me? You will have nothing." I looked him in the eye. For a second, I almost broke character. I almost told him that I had already bought his debt. I almost told him that the only person going to the street was him. But I held it back. The payoff needed to be public. It needed to be absolute. "I understand the risk," I said softly. "Get out," Tyler spat. "Just get out of my sight. You are useless. Dad was right about you. A complete waste of space." I turned and walked toward the door. Vanessa shouted after me. "Don't expect an invite to the funeral reception. We are only inviting people who actually care about this family." I walked out of the house and down the porch steps. The humid air hit my face, but I felt cold and focused. I got into my car and locked the door. I pulled my phone out and stopped the recording. File saved. I had his confession. I had him on tape lying about the estate's value. I had him on tape admitting he intended to take the house for himself. I had him on tape coercing a beneficiary. It was fraud, attempted grand larceny, and it was beautiful. I started the car and drove away from Oak Street. I was not going back to the Walmart parking lot tonight. I had work to do. I drove to a 24-hour FedEx office on the other side of town. The fluorescent lights inside were blindingly bright, humming with a low electric buzz. The shop was empty, save for a tired-looking employee behind the counter who barely looked up when I entered. I walked over to one of the self-service computer terminals and logged in. I inserted my encrypted USB drive. It contained the dossier I had been compiling for 5 years, combined with the new financial data Sterling had sent me an hour ago. I opened the folder labeled Project Phoenix. First, I opened the bank statements. Not mine, but the shell company's. Phoenix Holdings, LLC. I selected the documents showing the purchase of the foreclosure deed 5 years ago. I selected the monthly transfer receipts showing that I had paid the property taxes, the insurance, and the maintenance costs for 60 months straight. Print. The large industrial printer in the corner whirred to life. It began to churn out page after page of undeniable proof. Next, I opened Tyler's file. I pulled up the credit report Sterling had bought. The pages were a sea of red ink, defaulted loans, maxed out visas, the judgment from the Las Vegas casino for $12,000. I printed the text messages he had sent to his bookie, which the private investigator had intercepted. I printed the emails where he bragged to his friends about waiting for the old man to kick the bucket so he could cash out. Print. The stack of paper grew thicker. Then I opened the folder on Vanessa, her real estate license probation records, the cease and desist letters from clients she had defrauded, and petty as it was, the invoice from the Chinese manufacturer for the fake designer shoes, which I had tracked down using the serial number I memorized. Print. I stood there for an hour watching the machine work. The rhythm was hypnotic. Swish, click, slide. Swish, click, slide. Each page was a nail in their coffin. Each page was a rebuttal to every insult they had ever thrown at me. "You are useless." Click. "You are a failure." Click. "You are nothing." Click. When the printing stopped, the tray was full. I picked up the stack. It was heavy, warm from the fuser. It felt like a brick, a weapon. I took the papers to the binding station. I grabbed a heavy black cover and a clear plastic front. I punched the holes. I threaded the plastic comb binding through the spine. I snapped it shut. I held the finished product in my hands. 200 pages of financial ruin. On the cover, I had printed a simple title in bold black letters: Asset Verification and Liability Report, the Estate of Vance. I paid the sleepy clerk in cash. He handed me a receipt, not knowing he had just facilitated the destruction of a family. I walked back out to my car. It was midnight now. The city was quiet. I placed the dossier on the passenger seat next to me. It sat there, like a passenger, a silent partner in my plan. I drove to a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. I could have booked the Four Seasons, but I needed to stay in the mindset. I checked into a room that smelled of mildew and old cigarettes. I lay down on the lumpy mattress, staring at the water stain on the ceiling. I reached out and touched the black binder on the nightstand. Tomorrow was Wednesday, a day of waiting, a day of silence, and then Thursday. I thought about Tyler's face when he slammed his hand on the table. "You will have nothing." I closed my eyes and whispered into the darkness. "I have everything, Tyler, and by Thursday afternoon, you will know exactly what nothing feels like." I slept deeper than I had in years. The sleep of the righteous, the sleep of the executioner the night before the hanging. The elevator ride to the 40th floor of the Sterling and Henderson building was a study in silence. The lift was a glass capsule that ascended rapidly up the spine of the skyscraper, leaving the noise and the grime of the city far below. I stood in the center of the car, watching the numbers tick upward on the digital display. 38, 39, 40. The door slid open with a soft, expensive whisper. I stepped into the lobby of the law firm. It smelled of old leather, lemon oil, and billable hours. The carpet was thick enough to swallow the sound of my footsteps. I was 20 minutes early. In my world, if you are on time, you are late. I walked to the reception desk. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah with impeccably pinned hair, looked up and smiled. She did not ask for my name. She knew who paid the firm's retainer fees, even if my name was not on the building's signage. "Good morning, Ms. Vance," she said softly. "Mr. Henderson is ready for you in conference room B. Can I get you anything sparkling water, espresso?" "Just water." "Sarah." "Thank you," I said. I walked into the conference room. It was a cavernous space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. In the distance, I could see the smog hovering over the suburb where my parents' house sat, where Tyler was currently probably struggling to find a parking spot for his leased Mercedes. I sat down at the head of the long mahogany table but then corrected myself. No, today I had to play the part. I moved to the chair on the far left, the one furthest from the window, the seat of the least important person in the room. I pulled a magazine out of my tote bag. It was this month's issue of Forbes. I opened it to page 42. The headline read, "The Invisible Hand, How Anonymous Consultants Are Reshaping Corporate Debt." There was no photo of my face, just a silhouette of a woman standing in front of a vault. The article described a 31-year-old financial prodigy who had saved 3 Fortune 500 companies from bankruptcy in the last year. It mentioned my net worth. It mentioned my nickname in the industry, the surgeon. I read the article about myself, allowing a small, private smile to touch my lips. It was a strange feeling reading about my own success while wearing a blazer I had bought at a thrift store for $6. It grounded me. It reminded me that power is not about what you wear or how loud you speak. Power is about what you know that everyone else does not. 15 minutes passed. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Mr. Henderson, my parents' family lawyer, entered the room. He was a man of 80 with skin like parchment paper and eyes that had seen every variation of human greed. He shook my hand warmly. "Claire," he said, his voice gravelly, "I am sorry we are meeting under these circumstances, but I must say the instructions you sent over regarding the Phoenix Holdings addendum, they are diabolical. I just want everything to be accurate, Mr. Henderson," I said. He sat at the head of the table arranging his files. We waited. 10 more minutes passed, then 15. Suddenly, the heavy double doors of the lobby burst open. I could hear them before I saw them. "I am telling you, the GPS said turn left. It is not my fault this building has a stupid layout." That was Tyler. Then came the high-pitched, performative voice of Vanessa. "Hey guys, sorry about the shaky cam. We are literally running to the lawyer's office right now to get our inheritance. Look at this view. Oh my God, we are so high up." They tumbled into the conference room like a circus act. Tyler was wearing a suit that was too shiny with a tie that was too wide. He was sweating. Vanessa was holding her phone up on a selfie stick, live streaming their entrance to her 4,000 followers. "You are late," Mr. Henderson said, not looking up from his papers. Tyler ignored him. He looked around the room, impressed despite himself. He whistled low. "Nice digs, Henderson. I guess overcharging my parents for 30 years paid for the view, huh?" Tyler pulled out the chair at the opposite end of the table, sitting down with a heavy sigh. He kicked his feet out, crossing his ankles. Vanessa sat next to him, propping her phone up against a crystal water pitcher so she could keep filming. "Sorry we are late," Vanessa said, addressing the camera, not the lawyer. "The valet was being totally rude to us. He did not want to park the Benz in the front." "Can you believe that?" She glanced at me then, as if just noticing I was in the room. "Oh, you are here. I did not see you in the corner. You blend in with the wallpaper." I did not respond. I just folded my Forbes magazine and placed it face down on the table. "Let us get this over with," Tyler said, checking his watch. "I have a meeting with a contractor at 2. We are ripping out the kitchen on Monday." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. He put on a pair of reading glasses, peering over the rims at Tyler with undisguised distaste. "Mr. Vance, before we begin, I must ask that all recording devices be turned off. This is a private legal proceeding." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Ugh, fine. Bye, guys. I will update you when we are rich." She tapped the screen, ending the stream, but I saw her slip the phone into her lap, the camera lens still facing outward. She was still recording. Good. I wanted her to record this. Mr. Henderson opened the thick leather binder in front of him. The sound of the heavy paper turning was the only noise in the room. I, Arthur Vance, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, Henderson began. Tyler drummed his fingers on the table. Skip the intro. Henderson, we know who he was. Get to the assets. Henderson paused. He looked at Tyler for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he continued, his voice monotone. To my son, Tyler Vance, whom I have supported with patience and hope, I leave the following items. First, my collection of vintage postage stamps stored in the attic. Tyler stopped drumming his fingers. He sat up straighter. Stamps. Yes, Henderson said. A collection spanning 40 years. Tyler grinned, looking at Vanessa. Did you hear that? Vintage stamps? Those things are worth a fortune. I saw a show about it. Some of those stamps go for like 10 grand a pop. I kept my face neutral. I knew that collection. I had appraised it for Dad 5 years ago. They were mass-produced stamps from the 80s. The entire binder was worth maybe $50 on eBay. But Tyler did not know that. He saw dollar signs where there was only dust. Nice, Tyler said, nodding. Good start, Dad. What else? Henderson continued. Second, I leave to Tyler my entire wardrobe of suits and coats in the hope that he might one day grow into the stature of a man who earns his own way. Tyler frowned. Old clothes? Whatever. I will donate them for the tax write-off. Keep going. And finally, Henderson read, pausing for effect. I designate my son, Tyler Vance, as the sole executor of my physical estate, granting him the full responsibility of managing all assets and liabilities associated with the family name. Tyler slammed his hand on the table, jubilant. Yes. Did you hear that? Sole executor? That means I am the boss. That means I own it all. He turned to me, his eyes gleaming with malice. Sorry, sis. Looks like Dad made a choice. He chose the leader. He chose the man of the house. Vanessa clapped her hands, a sharp, greedy sound. So that includes the house, right? The estate means the house. Henderson looked at Vanessa over his glasses. Being the executor gives Mr. Vance the authority to manage the estate's property. See? Tyler crowed. It is mine. The house is mine. He leaned back, putting his hands behind his head. Man, this is easier than I thought. I thought you were going to fight me on this, Claire. But I guess even Dad knew you could not handle the pressure. I stayed silent. I watched him gloat. He was celebrating receiving the keys to a burning building. He had just accepted responsibility for the liabilities. He had just legally agreed to manage the debts. He was so blinded by the title of executor that he did not understand the burden it carried. What about her? Tyler jerked his thumb in my direction. Did he leave her anything, or did he finally realize she is a lost cause? Henderson turned the page. His expression softened slightly as he looked at me. To my daughter Claire, he read, I leave the collection of my wife's personal journals spanning from 1990 to present day, and I leave the care and sole ownership of the family cat Barnaby. The room went silent for a second. Then Tyler threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, cruel, braying laugh that filled the high-ceilinged room. A cat, he choked out. He left you the cat. Oh my God, that is perfect. That is absolutely poetic. The crazy cat lady starter kit. Here you go, Claire. Have some old diaries and a senile animal that pees on the rug. Vanessa joined in, covering her mouth to hide her smirk. Oh, Claire, that is so sweet. Barnaby really likes you. I mean, he hates everyone else, but I guess misery loves company. Tyler wiped a tear from his eye. Seriously, though, that is it. No cash, no bonds, just a cat and some books. That is the extent of the specific bequests to Claire, Henderson said, his voice tight. Tyler shook his head, looking at me with mock sympathy. Wow, that is cold. Even for Dad. I mean, I knew he was disappointed in you, but I did not think he would humiliate you from the grave. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a patronizing tone. Look, Claire, Since I am the executor, and since I am now the owner of the house, I am going to be a nice guy. You can come by and pick up the cat tomorrow, but make sure you bring a carrier. I do not want that thing scratching the leather seats of my new car when I drive it to the shelter if you do not show up." I looked at Tyler. I looked at his smug, sweating face. I looked at Vanessa, who was already texting her friends about the victory. "I will pick up Barnaby, Tyler," I said quietly. "And I will take the journals," Good Tyler said. "And hey, do not feel bad. Someone has to win and someone has to lose. It is just biology. Alpha males rise to the top. It is natural selection." He stood up, adjusting his jacket. "All right, Henderson, wrap it up. Where do I sign for the house deed? I want to get the sold sign up by Friday." Henderson did not move. He did not close the binder. He simply turned one more page. The paper made a sharp, crisp sound that seemed to echo in the room. "Please sit down," Mr. Vance Henderson said. "We are not finished." Tyler paused halfway out of his chair. "What do you mean?" "You read the will. He gave me the estate. I am the executor." Meeting adjourned. "There is a final section," Henderson said, his voice dropping to a lower, more serious register. "An addendum regarding the financial reality of the estate, and a disclosure of third-party liens that affect the distribution of assets." Tyler frowned. "Liens? What liens?" And Henderson continued, ignoring him. "There is a requirement to disclose the verified net worth of all beneficiaries to ensure the settlement of the family debts." Tyler waved his hand dismissively. My net worth is going to be $2 million once I sell that house. And Claire's net worth is what the value of a used Volvo and a cat." Henderson looked at me. I gave him a nearly imperceptible nod. It was time. "Sit down, Tyler," I said. My voice was different now. It was not the voice of the sister who cooked the burgers. It was the voice that made CEOs tremble in boardrooms in Tokyo and London. It was a voice of absolute command. Tyler looked at me, startled by the tone. He sat down slowly, confusion clouding his arrogance. "What is going on?" Vanessa asked, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "Why is she talking like that?" Henderson adjusted his glasses. He looked down at the document in front of him. "Regarding the real estate property located at 42 Oak Street," Henderson read, "the estate of Arthur Vance does not possess the deed to this property." Tyler froze. "What?" "The property was foreclosed upon 5 years ago due to unpaid mortgage debts," Henderson stated calmly. "However, the foreclosure was halted when the debt was purchased in full by a private investment firm." Tyler blinked, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. But we lived there. Dad lived there. Who bought it?" "The deed is currently held by a limited liability company," Henderson said. "A company called Phoenix Holdings, LLC." Tyler looked at Vanessa. "Who is Phoenix Holdings?" "Is that the bank?" I leaned forward. I placed my elbows on the mahogany table. I clasped my hands together. "No, Tyler," I said. "It is not the bank." Tyler looked at me. His eyes were wide, fearful. "Then who is it?" I reached into my tote bag. I pulled out the heavy black binder I had bound at FedEx the night before. I slid it across the table. It stopped right in front of Tyler. The title was embossed in gold, "Asset Verification, Phoenix Holdings, LLC." "Open it," I said. Tyler's hand shook as he opened the cover. He looked at the first page. It was the deed to the house. I looked at the bottom of the page, I said. "Look at the signature of the sole proprietor of Phoenix Holdings." Tyler looked. He squinted. Then he gasped. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated shock. "Claire Vance," he whispered. Vanessa grabbed the binder. "That is impossible," she screamed. "She is a bookkeeper. She makes 30 grand a year. This is a fake." "Read the next page." "Mr. Henderson," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Read the net worth verification." Henderson picked up the sheet of paper I had provided from the bank in Zurich. "Current verified assets of Ms. Claire Vance, including liquid capital real estate holdings under Phoenix Holdings and diversified investments." He paused. He looked at Tyler. $8,550,000. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy. It was crushing. Tyler looked at me. He looked at the binder. He looked at the Forbes magazine on the table, the article about the anonymous financial genius. The pieces slammed together in his mind. The mysterious accident he told people about. My unemployment. My silence. You, he stammered, you own the house. I own the house, Tyler, I said coldly. I have owned it for 5 years. You and Mom and Dad were my tenants. I let you live there for free, but tenants can be evicted. Tyler's face went white. All the blood drained from his skin. He looked like a ghost. And the debts, he whispered. The credit cards, I own those too, I said. I bought them on Sunday. While you were making me clean Vanessa's fake shoes, I was buying your life. Tyler stood up. He swayed. His eyes rolled back in his head. Oh, God, he muttered. And then, just like a tree that had been rotten on the inside for years, he fell. He collapsed onto the expensive carpet with a heavy thud. Vanessa screamed, dropping her phone. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just looked at Mr. Henderson. Please continue, Mr. Henderson, I said. I believe there is still the matter of the cat. The room smelled of smelling salts and desperation. Tyler sat up slowly in the leather chair, blinking rapidly as the world came back into focus. Vanessa was hovering over him, fanning his face with a glossy brochure she had plucked from the lobby, her other hand clutching her phone as if it were a lifeline. She had stopped live streaming, but her thumb was hovering over the record button, ready to capture either a miracle or a tragedy, depending on which would get more views. I watched my brother from across the mahogany table. I took a slow sip of water. I did not offer him help. I did not ask if he was okay. I simply waited. He had fainted because the truth was too heavy for his fragile ego to carry, but he was already trying to rewrite the narrative in his head. I could see the gears turning behind his glassy eyes. He was rejecting the reality of the last 5 minutes. He was convincing himself that the binder I had slid across the table was a prop, a joke, a mistake. I am fine, Tyler muttered, pushing Vanessa's hand away. He adjusted his tie, which was now crooked, and cleared his throat aggressively. Just low blood sugar. Skipped breakfast. Let us get back to it. He looked at me with a renewed, shaky defiance. You have had your little joke, Claire. Very funny. Phoenix Holdings. Cute name. But we all know Dad owned that house. I saw him pay the bills. I saw him mow the lawn. So, Mr. Henderson, if you are done with my sister's comedy routine, can we proceed with the actual distribution of assets? Mr. Henderson looked at Tyler over the rim of his spectacles. The lawyer's face was unreadable, a mask of professional patience that was wearing dangerously thin. He placed his hand flat on the open file in front of him. Mr. Vance, he said, his voice dropping to a register that commanded absolute silence. We are not done with the comedy routine, as you call it. We are now moving to Section 4 of the estate execution, the liabilities. Tyler waved a hand dismissively, regaining some of his color. Yeah, liabilities, credit cards, utility bills. I told you I will handle it. Just tell me what is left over. Mr. Henderson turned a page. The paper crackled in the silence. It is a fundamental principle of estate law, Mr. Vance, that one cannot inherit the assets without also inheriting the obligations attached to them. As the sole executor, a title you were quite eager to claim just moments ago, you are legally responsible for settling all outstanding debts before a single penny can be distributed to yourself. Tyler rolled his eyes, checking his watch again. I know how it works, Henderson. Just give me the number. How much did the old man owe? 10 grand 20. Henderson looked down at the spreadsheet. He ran his finger down a column of red ink. Item 1, Henderson read, unpaid property taxes for the fiscal years 2019 through 2023, including penalties and interest for non-payment. The total outstanding balance is $82,000. Tyler froze. His mouth opened slightly. 80? Wait. Dad paid the taxes. I saw the letters on his desk. Your father received the letters, Henderson corrected. He did not pay them. He could not pay them. Item 2. Henderson continued his pace, relentless. A home equity line of credit, or HELOC, taken out against the property 3 years ago. The principal amount was $200,000. It was maxed out within 3 months of opening. Tyler shifted in his seat. Sweat began to bead on his forehead again. A HELOC. What did he spend 200 grand on? He did not buy anything. The house looks exactly the same. Henderson looked up, his eyes locking onto Tyler's. "I believe you would know the answer to that better than anyone, Mr. Vance. The bank records show that the funds from this line of credit were transferred immediately to an account under the name Vance Venture Capital." The room went deadly silent. I looked at Tyler. I remembered Vance Venture Capital. It was the shell company Tyler had started when he wanted to become a day trader. He had lost everything in 6 weeks betting on volatile tech stocks. He had convinced our parents to leverage their home, their sanctuary, to fund his gambling addiction disguised as business acumen. Tyler swallowed hard, pulling at his collar. "Okay, so that is 200, plus the taxes." "Item 3, Henderson said, his voice like a hammer driving a nail. "A second mortgage finalized 18 months ago. This was a high-interest private loan classified as a distress loan. The terms were predatory, but your father signed them because he was desperate to cover the interest payments on the HELOC you drained. The outstanding balance on this note is $168,000. Tyler did not speak. He was doing the math in his head. His lips moved silently. 80, 200, 160. Total confirmed liabilities securing the estate, Henderson announced. $450,000. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. $450,000. It was a staggering sum for a retired couple living on a fixed pension. It was a sum that explained why my mother stopped buying new clothes. It explained why my father stopped going to the doctor. They were drowning silently to keep Tyler afloat. Vanessa let out a small, strangled squeak. 450,000. She looked at Tyler, horror dawning on her face. You said they were rich. You said we were getting a windfall." Tyler stood up. He slammed his hands on the table, trying to physically force the situation back under his control. "Calm down. Everyone just calm down." He looked wildly from Henderson to me to Vanessa. "Okay. So it is 450 grand. That is a lot. I get it, but it is not the end of the world." He pointed a shaking finger at the window toward the distant suburbs. "The house," he said, his voice rising in pitch. "The house is the Golden Goose. I had the appraisal done last week. Informal but accurate. That property sits on a double lot. In this market with a bidding war, we are looking at $1.2 million. Conservative estimate." He looked at Henderson, a desperate grin stretching across his face. "Do the math, Henderson. 1.2 million minus 450 grand in debt. That leaves $750,000. He laughed a hysterical, breathless sound. 750 grand. We are still in the green. We are still rich." He turned to Vanessa, grabbing her shoulders. "See, babe, it is fine. It is totally fine. We sell the house, we pay off these stupid debts, and we still walk away with $750,000. We can still get the condo in Miami. We can still get the G-Wagon." Vanessa's shoulders relaxed. She let out a breathy laugh. "Oh my God, Tyler, you scared me. I thought we were broke." No, Tyler said, pacing the room, now his confidence returning in a rush. "We are good. We just have to move fast. Henderson, I want you to list the house immediately, today. Get it on the MLS. I want an open house this weekend. We will price it aggressively to move." He stopped in front of me, looking down with a sneer. "See, Claire? This is why Dad made me the executor, because I see the big picture. You hear debt and you panic. I hear leverage. I see the equity. That is the difference between us. That is why I am the businessman and you are, well, you." I sat there watching him celebrate. It was fascinating in a morbid way. He was like a man jumping out of a plane without a parachute, cheering because he was flying, refusing to acknowledge the ground rushing up to meet him. He was claiming victory based on the sale of an asset he did not own to pay a debt he had created. I picked up the black binder again. I opened it to page 3. "Tyler," I said softly. He ignored me. He was talking to Vanessa about paint colors for the staging. "We need to go with Swiss Coffee White. It photographs better for the listing." "Tyler," I said a little louder. He spun around. "What? What do you want now? Are you going to ask for a loan because the answer is no? You got the cat. Be happy with the cat." I tapped the page in front of me. "You cannot sell the house, Tyler." He rolled his eyes. "Oh my God, are we back to this the Phoenix Holdings thing? Give it a rest, Claire. It is a fake document. You probably printed it at Kinko's. Dad lived there. Dad died there. It is his house. Mr. Henderson. I said, not taking my eyes off my brother. Please explain the nature of the second mortgage you just listed. Who is the lien holder? Henderson adjusted his glasses. He looked at the file. The second mortgage, he read, was purchased from the original lender, Sharks Bay Lending, 3 days ago. The current holder of the note is... He paused. He looked at the document. He looked at me. The current holder of the debt is Phoenix Holdings, LLC. Tyler frowned. Wait, what? And Henderson continued. The first mortgage, the one that went into foreclosure 5 years ago. He pulled out a certified copy of a deed. It had a gold seal on it. The foreclosure was completed. Mr. Vance, the title was transferred. Your parents were allowed to remain on the property under a tenancy at will agreement. They were renters. They did not own the home. They have not owned the home for 60 months. Tyler stopped pacing. He stared at the lawyer. Renters, he whispered. Yes, Henderson said. And the landlord, the owner of the deed, is Phoenix Holdings, LLC. Tyler looked at me. His face was a mixture of confusion and terror. You own the debt. And the house. I stood up slowly. I smoothed the wrinkles in my thrift store blazer. I bought the debt, Tyler. I bought the tax lien. I bought the second mortgage. I bought the HELOC you forced Dad to take out. I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of him. And because I own the debt, and because I own the house, there is no equity for you. There is no $1.2 million. There is no profit. I leaned in close. There is only the $450,000 of debt. And since you just accepted the role of executor, since you just signed the paper accepting responsibility for the estate's liabilities, I smiled a cold, sharp smile that reached my eyes. Congratulations, Tyler. You do not have $750,000. You are $450,000 in the hole, and I am your creditor. Tyler looked at Vanessa. Vanessa looked at the door, calculating if she could run fast enough in her fake heels. But we can sell it, Tyler stammered, his voice cracking. We can sell it and pay you back. You cannot sell what is not yours, I said. It is my house. I am not selling. I am evicting. Tyler's knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the table to hold himself up. Evicting, he wheezed. Yes, I said. You have 24 hours to vacate my property. If you are not out by noon tomorrow, I will have the sheriff remove you. And after that, I picked up the file Henderson had read from. After that, I am going to garnish your wages. I am going to seize your bank accounts. I am going to put a lien on that Mercedes you leased. I am going to collect every single penny of the debt you saddled our parents with. Tyler looked at me, tears welling up in his eyes. Claire, please, we are family. I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. Family, I asked. Family is what you kicked out into the rain on Sunday. Family is what you mocked for being poor. Family is the sister you tried to trick into signing a waiver. I turned back to the table and picked up my Forbes magazine. You wanted to be the man of the house, Tyler. You wanted the legacy. I tossed the magazine at him. It hit him in the chest and fell to the floor, landing next to his polished shoes. Now you have it. You have the debt. You have the responsibility. And you have absolutely nothing else. I looked at Mr. Henderson. I think we are done here. I will take the cat carrier now. I walked toward the door. I did not look back. I heard Vanessa sobbing. I heard Tyler retching. I pressed the button for the elevator. The doors opened immediately. I stepped inside. As the doors closed, cutting off the sound of my brother's ruin, I checked my watch. It was 11 a.m. I had a lunch meeting with a client at noon. I was going to order the lobster. The silence in the conference room was heavy, suffocating, and broken only by the sound of Tyler's heavy breathing. He was staring at the lawyer, Mr. Henderson, with a look of desperate confusion, the kind of look a man gives when the ground beneath his feet suddenly turns into water. He had just processed the debt. He had just accepted the $450,000 hole he was standing in. But his mind, ever the mechanism of self-preservation, was already building a ladder. I could see the calculations running behind his eyes. He was thinking that if the house was worth $1.2 million and the debt was $500,000, he still had a cushion. He still had a victory. He was clinging to the equity of the house on Oak Street like a drowning man clings to a piece of driftwood. But Mr. Henderson was about to pull the wood away. The lawyer adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting off the lenses hiding his eyes. He placed his hand flat on the deed that lay on the mahogany table. It was a gesture of finality, a gesture that said the conversation was over before it had even begun. "I'm afraid you are laboring under a significant misapprehension," Mr. Vance Henderson said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "You are doing mental arithmetic based on the sale of the property. You are calculating profits. You are planning listings. But there is a fundamental flaw in your logic." Tyler wiped a bead of sweat from his upper lip. "What flaw?" "It is simple math. Assets minus liabilities equals profit. I learned that in Econ 101. The flaw," Henderson said, leaning forward slightly, "is that the estate of Arthur and Martha Vance does not include the real property located at 42 Oak Street." Tyler blinked. He looked at Vanessa, who was chewing on a fingernail, her earlier bravado completely evaporated. Then he looked back at the lawyer. "I do not understand," Tyler said, letting out a nervous, incredulous laugh. "Of course it includes the house. I grew up there. My parents lived there for 30 years. They died there. I have the keys in my pocket right now. Possession is not ownership," Mr. Vance Henderson stated. Tyler stood up again, bracing his hands on the table. "Stop speaking in riddles. If they did not own it, who owned it?" The bank Henderson opened a new file folder. He pulled out a document that looked old, its edges slightly yellowed. 5 years ago, your father suffered a massive heart attack. You might remember this. It was the same year you were traveling through Europe on a journey of self-discovery funded by your mother's savings. Tyler flinched at the reminder, but he stayed silent. "The medical bills from that event were catastrophic," Henderson continued. "Your parents had inadequate insurance. To keep the lights on and to pay for your father's rehabilitation, they stopped paying the mortgage. They stopped paying the property taxes. They prioritized survival over equity. For 8 months, they defaulted on every major obligation attached to the home." I sat in my chair watching Tyler's face. He had not known this. Of course he had not known. Mom and Dad never told him anything that would worry him, and he never asked anything that did not involve a wire transfer. He had been posting photos of pasta in Italy while they were deciding between buying heart medication or paying the electric bill. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings in the winter of that year, Henderson said. It was a swift process. Your parents were 2 weeks away from eviction by the sheriff. They had packed boxes. They were looking at efficiency apartments in low-income housing. The house was gone, Mr. Vance. It was legally seized. The auction was scheduled. Tyler looked like he had been punched in the stomach. He sank back into his chair. "Foreclosed," he whispered. But they stayed. They never moved. "We had Christmas there that year. Nothing changed." "That is correct," Henderson said. "Nothing changed visibly. But legally, everything changed. 3 days before the auction, a private investment firm intervened. They approached the bank and offered to purchase the distressed debt in full, plus a premium, to halt the auction and transfer the title immediately." Tyler frowned, his brow furrowing. "A firm? What firm? Why would they do that?" "Because it was a distressed asset with high potential value," Henderson explained smoothly. "But the terms of the acquisition were unusual. The purchasing entity, a company known as Phoenix Holdings, executed a leaseback agreement with your parents on the same day they acquired the deed." "A leaseback?" Tyler asked. "Yes. Phoenix Holdings allowed your parents to remain in the property as tenants. They signed a lifetime lease agreement." Tyler let out a breath, looking relieved. Okay, so they were renting. Whatever. But if they had a lifetime lease, does that pass to me? Can I sublet it?" "You are missing the point," Henderson said, his voice sharpening. "They were tenants. Tenants do not own the equity. Tenants do not profit from the sale. And regarding the terms of the lease," Henderson pulled out a single sheet of paper. "The monthly rent charged by Phoenix Holdings to your parents was set at $1 per month." The room went silent. Vanessa stopped chewing her nail. Tyler stared at the lawyer, his mouth hanging open. $1, Tyler repeated. $1 a month, Yes, Henderson said. And Phoenix Holdings also assumed responsibility for all major repairs, all property taxes, and all insurance premiums. For the last 5 years, this company has effectively subsidized your parents' existence, allowing them to live in $1 million home for the price of a pack of gum per year. Tyler shook his head, trying to process the information. That makes no sense. No company does that. That is not business. That is charity. Who are these people? Henderson shrugged. They are a private holding company. They value anonymity. Tyler's shock was quickly replaced by a surging, irrational anger. He felt cheated. He felt like a prize he had already spent had been snatched away from him by a faceless corporation. He slammed his fist onto the table. "This is a scam," he shouted. "It has to be a scam. They took advantage of old people. They tricked my dad into signing over the deed for nothing. They paid off $300,000 of debt," Henderson corrected. "That is hardly nothing." "I do not care," Tyler roared, standing up and pacing the small conference room. His face was turning a dangerous shade of purple. "This Phoenix Holdings stole my inheritance. That house is my birthright. They cannot just swoop in and take it because my dad was sick. I am not going to let this stand." He spun around, pointing a finger at Henderson. "I want the name of the CEO. I want the address. I want everything you have on Phoenix Holdings." "Mr. Vance, I advise you to calm down," Henderson said calmly. "No, I will not calm down," Tyler yelled. "I am going to sue them. I am going to sue them for predatory lending. I am going to sue them for elder abuse. I am going to drag this Phoenix Holdings into court, and I am going to bleed them dry. I will get that house back. Do you hear me? I will destroy them." He was panting now, his eyes wild. He turned to Vanessa. "Google them. Look up Phoenix Holdings. Find out who runs it. I bet it is some slimeball shell company run by a guy in a basement. I am going to find him, and I am going to make him wish he never heard the name Vance." Vanessa was frantically tapping on her phone screen. I am looking. There are like 1 million companies with that name. I cannot find the specific one." Tyler turned back to the lawyer, leaning over the table, invading Henderson's personal space. "Tell me who they are. Henderson, you have the file right there. Who signed the lease? Who is the signatory? I want a name. I want to know who I am suing." I watched him. I watched the veins bulge in his neck. I watched the spit fly from his mouth. He was so ugly in his greed. He was ready to destroy a benefactor who had saved his parents from homelessness just because that benefactor had interrupted his payday. He did not care that Phoenix Holdings had kept a roof over his dying mother's head. He only cared that Phoenix Holdings owned the roof. I decided it was time. I closed the Forbes magazine I had been reading. I placed it gently on the table. The sound was soft, but in the tension of the room it sounded like a gavel striking a sounding block. "Tyler," I said. My voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It cut through his shouting like a scalpel. It was a tone I had never used with him before. It was not the voice of the little sister who loaned him $20. It was the voice of the woman who negotiated hostile takeovers for breakfast. It was the voice of authority. He stopped pacing. He turned to look at me, annoyed. "Shut up, Claire. Cannot you see I am handling this? I am going to get the house back." "No," I said. "You are not." He sneered at me. "What do you know about it? Go play with your cat. This is men's business. I am going to sue this CEO, and I am going to win." I stood up. I did not rush. I uncrossed my legs, placed my hands on the edge of the table, and pushed my chair back. I stood to my full height. I looked him directly in the eyes, and for the first time in his life, he saw something in my gaze that made him flinch. He saw the predator. "You cannot sue the CEO of Phoenix Holdings, Tyler." I said, my voice steady, cold, and echoing with absolute power. He blinked, confused by my demeanor. "Why not?" "Because," I said, taking a slow step toward him. I reached into my tote bag. I pulled out a heavy black corporate seal. It was made of brass and steel. I set it on the table with a heavy thud. Next to it, I placed a business card. It was thick, matte black with gold lettering. I slid the card across the mahogany surface. It spun slowly and stopped right in front of his hand. Tyler looked down. He read the card. "Phoenix Holdings, LLC, Claire Vance, Chief Executive Officer. The air left the room. It was as if a vacuum had been turned on, sucking out all the oxygen, all the noise, all the bravado. Tyler looked at the card. Then he looked at me. Then back at the card. "What? What is this?" he whispered. I took another step. I was standing right in front of him now. I was close enough to smell the fear coming off him. "You cannot sue Phoenix Holdings, Tyler, because Phoenix Holdings is me." I watched the words hit him. I watched his brain try to reject them. "No," he stammered, shaking his head. "No, that is impossible. You are a bookkeeper. You drive a Volvo. You do not have any money. I am a crisis manager for global sovereign debt," I said, enunciating every syllable. "The bookkeeper job was a lie I told you so you would not ask me for money. The Volvo is armored plated because I deal with dangerous people. And the money?" I laughed, a short, sharp sound that had no humor in it. "I have been paying for everything for 5 years, Tyler. Who do you think paid for Dad's heart surgery? Who do you think paid for Mom's hospice care? Who do you think kept the heat on in that house while you were buying fake watches and playing cryptocurrency genius?" Tyler took a step back. He bumped into his chair. He looked terrified. "You," he squeaked. "Me," I said. "I bought the house 5 years ago to save Dad from the humiliation of eviction. I rented it back to them for $1 so they could keep their dignity. I own the roof, the walls, the floorboards, and the ground you are standing on." I leaned in closer, my face inches from his. "So when you say you are going to sue the CEO, you are saying you are going to sue the only person who has kept this family from living in a gutter for the last half-decade." Tyler looked at Vanessa. She was staring at me with her mouth open, her phone forgotten in her lap. She looked like she was seeing a ghost, but... "Why?" Tyler whispered. "Why did not you tell us?" "Because I knew this would happen," I said. "I knew the moment you thought there was money, you would turn into a vulture. I wanted to see how far you would go. I wanted to see if there was any part of you that was actually a brother, or if you were just a parasite." I gestured to the pile of documents on the table. "And you gave me my answer. You tried to force me to sign a waiver. You threw my clothes in the trash. You made me clean your wife's fake shoes." I picked up the business card and tapped it against his chest. "You failed the test, Tyler." He looked down at the card against his shirt. He looked like a child who had been caught stealing. So the house is yours?" he asked, his voice trembling. "It is mine," I confirmed. "And since you are not a tenant on the lease, and since you just threatened to sue me," I turned to Mr. Henderson. "Mr. Henderson, please give my brother the document we prepared this morning." Henderson handed Tyler a single sheet of paper. It was not a will. It was not a deed. Tyler read the top line. His hands shook so hard the paper rattled. "Notice to vacate." "You have 24 hours, I said. The air in the conference room had turned stagnant heavy with the weight of shattered delusions. Tyler stood there clutching the notice to vacate, his knuckles white against the paper. He looked like a man trying to read a map in a language he did not understand. The reality of his situation was crashing down on him, but his ego was fighting a losing battle to keep the walls from closing in. He looked at me, his eyes searching for a punchline, for a sign that this was just a cruel prank. But I gave him nothing. My face was as impassive as the marble statues in the lobby. I watched as he tried to speak, but only a dry rasp came out. He looked at the black binder on the table, the one embossed with the name of the company that owned his childhood home. He looked at Vanessa, who was staring at her phone screen, not scrolling, just staring at her own reflection in the dark glass, paralyzed by the sudden shift in power. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. The sound was sharp, cutting through the silence. He reached for the binder and opened it to the section labeled Financial History and Benefactor Proof. Mr. Vance Henderson said, his voice steady and relentless. "Before you accuse your sister of forgery or theft again, I suggest we review the exhibits in front of you. These are the certified bank records of Phoenix Holdings, LLC. They detail the flow of capital from Ms. Vance's private accounts into the maintenance of your parents' lives." Tyler looked down at the page Henderson was pointing to. Exhibit A. Henderson read, "Date, November 14th, 5 years ago. Amount $62,000. Recipient, St. Mary's Hospital Cardiac Unit. Purpose, emergency bypass surgery for Arthur Vance." Tyler blinked. I thought insurance paid for that." Henderson shook his head. Your father's insurance had lapsed 3 months prior due to non-payment of premiums. Ms. Vance paid the bill in full cash wire transfer under the condition of anonymity, so your father would not feel the shame of charity. Tyler swallowed hard. He looked at me. You paid for the surgery. I did not answer. I just pointed to the next line. Exhibit B, Henderson continued. Date, January through December of the following year. 12 recurring payments of $4,000 each. Recipient Oak Street Utility and Tax Authority. Purpose prevention of lien seizure and utility shutoff. Tyler ran a hand through his hair, messing up his carefully styled gel. I did not know. They never told me. Because they were protecting you, I said softly. They wanted you to be proud of them. They wanted you to think they were successful, so you would not worry while you were backpacking across Europe posting photos of your espresso. Henderson turned the page. Exhibit C. This is a comprehensive list of the monthly stipend paid by Phoenix Holdings to Martha Vance for household groceries and medication. $2,000 a month for 60 months. Total contribution, $120,000. Vanessa gasped. $120,000. She looked at me with a mixture of hatred and greed. You gave them that much money. Why didn't you just give it to us? We could have invested it. I looked at her cold, painted face. I invested it in their dignity, Vanessa. Something you know nothing about. Tyler slumped into his chair. He looked defeated. Okay, I get it. You helped them out. You have some money. But the house... Surely the house is worth more than what you put in. Even if we pay you back, there has to be equity left. I sighed. He still did not understand. He was still trying to find a profit margin in a bankruptcy filing. Mr. Henderson, I said, please read the final summary. The net worth verification. Henderson flipped to the very last page of the binder. It was a single sheet of heavy cream paper stamped with the seal of a Swiss auditing firm. Pursuant to the inheritance laws and the proof of solvency required to settle the estate debts, Henderson read, his voice taking on a formal final tone. We have verified the total assets of Ms. Claire Vance. This figure includes her liquid capital, her diversified stock portfolio, her real estate holdings under Phoenix Holdings, and the current valuation of her consultancy firm. Tyler looked up. He held his breath. Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes wide. The total verified net worth of Ms. Claire Vance is $8,550,000. The number hung in the air. It echoed off the glass walls. $8,550,000. Tyler's eyes rolled back. His face went gray, the color of wet ash. He made a small choking sound in the back of his throat. His hand reached out to grab the edge of the table, but he missed. His knees gave way completely. He collapsed. It was not a graceful fall. It was dead weight hitting the floor with a sickening thud. He lay there on the expensive carpet, his limbs sprawled, his shiny suit bunched up around his waist. Vanessa screamed. She jumped up, but in her panic, her hands flailed. Her phone, the precious device that held her entire fake life, slipped from her grip. It tumbled through the air, turning end over end. It hit the corner of the mahogany table leg with a loud crack before smashing onto the floor. Vanessa froze. She looked at Tyler unconscious on the rug. Then she looked at her phone. The screen was shattered, a spider web of broken glass obscuring the camera lens. My phone, she whimpered. My followers. I stood up and walked around the table. I stepped over my brother's legs. I did not check his pulse. I knew he was fine. He was just a coward hiding from reality in the dark. I stopped in front of Vanessa. She looked up at me, terrified. She was looking at an $8 million predator, and she was realizing she was just a mouse with a fake Gucci bag. You have 60 minutes, I said. Vanessa blinked, tears streaming down her face, ruining her mascara. What? You have 60 minutes to get back to the house and remove your personal belongings, I said, checking my watch. The movers I hired are already on their way. They will be there at noon. Anything left in the house after that time becomes the property of Phoenix Holdings, and I will have it thrown in the dumpster. But, Tyler, she stammered, pointing at her husband on the floor. Leave him, I said, or drag him out. I do not care. But if you are not off my property in 1 hour, I am calling the police. I will press charges for trespassing vandalism for the damage you did to the patio and attempted fraud for the documents Tyler tried to make me sign." Vanessa scrambled back, tripping over her own heels. She looked at Tyler, then she looked at the door. Self-preservation kicked in. She grabbed her broken phone and ran. She did not try to wake him up. She did not ask for help. She ran out of the conference room, her heels clicking frantically down the hallway, leaving her husband behind. I looked down at Tyler. He was starting to stir, groaning softly. Mr. Henderson closed the binder. "Shall I call security to help him down to the lobby?" "Yes," I said. "And tell them to wait with him until he gets a cab. I do not want him wandering back up here." I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The sun was shining on the skyscrapers. The world looked bright and clean. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a burden I had been carrying for years. It was done. The toxicity was excised. The debt was paid. I turned back to the lawyer. "Mr. Henderson, initiate the transfer of the deed. I want the house put into a trust." "We are going to start the renovation next week." "A trust?" Henderson asked. "For whom?" "For the Mary Vance Foundation," I said. "It is going to be a shelter for elderly women who have lost their homes to foreclosure. It is what my mother would have wanted." Henderson smiled, a genuine expression of respect. "A noble cause, Claire. Your parents would be proud." I picked up my tote bag. I looked at Tyler one last time. Security guards were entering the room, lifting him up. He looked small. He looked ordinary. He was just a man who owed a lot of money. "Goodbye, Tyler," I whispered. I walked out of the office and into the elevator. I pressed the button for the lobby. As the car descended, I did not feel triumph. I felt peace, the kind of deep, quiet peace that comes after a long storm has finally passed. I walked out of the building and into the bustling street. I hailed a cab. "Where to, lady?" the driver asked. "The Ritz-Carlton," I said. "I have a suite waiting." "And then take me to the best steakhouse in the city. I have a victory to celebrate." 6 months had passed since the day Tyler fainted on the lawyer's carpet. The seasons had changed, turning the leaves of the oak trees in my old neighborhood into brilliant shades of gold and red. The house at 42 Oak Street looked different now. The peeling paint was gone, replaced by a warm, welcoming cream color. The overgrown lawn was manicured. A wheelchair ramp had been tastefully added to the front porch, blending in with the architecture. A small brass plaque by the front door read, "The Martha Vance Sanctuary." I stood on the sidewalk watching as a nurse wheeled an elderly woman out onto the porch to enjoy the afternoon sun. The woman was smiling. She looked safe. She looked home. I had spent $500,000 renovating the place, bringing it up to code, installing medical equipment, and hiring a full-time staff. It was not a house of secrets anymore. It was a house of care. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from a local news outlet. "Former real estate agent exposed in counterfeit goods scandal." I clicked the link. It was a story about Vanessa. After I evicted them, her life had spiraled. The creditors I unleashed had seized her car and frozen her accounts. Desperate for money, she had started selling her designer wardrobe online. But the buyers quickly realized the goods were fake. They reported her. The police raided her apartment and found hundreds of counterfeit items. She was facing fines and had been permanently banned from the real estate board. The comments section was brutal. The internet, which she had courted so desperately, had turned on her. She was not an influencer anymore. She was a punchline. She had changed her name and moved 2 towns over, trying to disappear. I swiped the notification away. She was irrelevant. I walked to the curb where my car was waiting. It was a new Porsche 911 Turbo S painted a deep midnight black. It was sleek, powerful, and understated. I slid into the driver's seat, the leather smelling rich and new. I started the engine, the rumble of the motor vibrating through the chassis. I pulled away from the curb, driving slowly through the town I used to call home. I passed the high school. I passed the grocery store where I used to buy discount food for my parents. I felt like a ghost visiting a past life, observing it, but no longer part of it. I turned onto the main avenue that led to the highway. Up ahead, I saw a bus stop. It was a bleak concrete bench with a cracked plastic shelter. A man was standing there, waiting for the number 42 bus that went out to the industrial park near the airport. He was wearing a neon yellow safety vest over a gray hoodie. He looked older than I remembered. His face was gaunt, unshaven. He was holding a clear plastic bag that contained a sandwich and a bottle of water, the mandatory lunch bag for warehouse workers at the Amazon fulfillment center designed to prevent theft. It was Tyler. He looked tired. The arrogance was gone from his posture. He was shifting his weight from foot to foot, his cheap work boots looking heavy on his feet. He was checking his watch, not a Rolex anymore, but a cheap digital Casio. He was worried about being late for his shift. He was worried about clocking in. He was living the life he had mocked me for. I slowed the car down. The traffic light ahead turned red. I idled right next to the bus stop. He looked up. He saw the black Porsche. For a moment, his eyes tracked the lines of the car with a familiar hunger. He admired the rims, the tint, the sheer cost of the machine. Then his gaze moved to the driver's window. I pressed the button. The window slid down smoothly. Our eyes met. He froze. He recognized me. He recognized the sister he had kicked out into the rain. He saw the woman who held the deed to his life. "Claire," he mouthed. The word was lost in the traffic noise, but I saw it. He took a step forward, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Maybe he thought I would stop. Maybe he thought I would offer him a ride. Maybe he thought family still meant something after everything he had done. I looked at him. I looked at the neon vest. I looked at the plastic lunch bag. The light turned green. I did not smile. I did not wave. I did not frown. I simply pressed the accelerator. The engine roared a deep, guttural sound of power. The car surged forward, leaving him behind in a cloud of exhaust and dust. I watched him in the rearview mirror. He stood there for a second, hand half raised, and then he let it drop. He slumped back onto the bench, defeated, waiting for a bus that would take him to a job he hated to pay for a life he could barely afford. I turned onto the highway ramp, merging into the fast lane. I drove toward the city skyline, toward my penthouse, toward my next meeting, toward a future that belonged entirely to me. I turned up the music. I didn't look back. The best revenge is not destroying them. It is outgrowing them until they are just small figures in your rearview mirror, getting smaller and smaller until they disappear completely. If you enjoyed this story of justice served, cold smash, that like button. My favorite part was when Vanessa realized her fake shoes couldn't help her run from the truth. What was yours? Let me know in the comments below. And do not forget to subscribe for more stories of people getting exactly what they deserve.